We are going to go ahead and call this hearing to order. Tonight, we are here to examine serious concerns regarding the overreach of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, commonly known as ICE, and to consider legislation that protects the safety, constitutional rights, and dignity of every person who calls Columbus home. I want to begin by thanking all of my colleagues for being here tonight, our community partners, advocates, and residents. I wish that folks online could see that we have an open house today. I feel like it's a little bit of a family reunion because all of you have been partners in this work for so long. I want to thank all of our residents who, whether you took the time to send in written testimony or you're here with us this evening to participate in this important hearing tonight. Your presence here reflects the seriousness of this moment. I believe deeply that local government has a responsibility to ensure that every person in our community feels safe, respected, and protected under the law. Local resources exist to serve local residents, not to advance unchecked federal enforcement actions. We cannot ignore federal law or federal policy, but we can decide how our city interacts with it. We can determine how our resources are used to address local priorities such as public health, housing stability, and public safety. And we know that safety does not come from fear. It does not come from confusion about who has authority. And it certainly does not come from practices that erode trust between residents and the very institutions meant to serve them. In fact, the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution limits the federal government's ability to commandeer local resources. The Constitution applies to everyone within our borders. No agency, federal, state, or local, is above the Constitution. Due process is not optional. Civil rights are not conditional. When enforcement practices appear to exceed lawful authority or undermine basic protections, it is our obligation to respond. In our community and communities across the country like ours, we have heard troubling reports of ICE enforcement actions that go beyond reasonable boundaries, actions that create fear in schools, workplaces, houses of worship, and neighborhoods. When residents are afraid to report crimes, seek medical care, or cooperate with local law enforcement because they fear immigration consequences, all of us are less safe regardless of your immigration status. Tonight's conversation will be grounded in facts and respect. We welcome a range of perspectives. We understand that immigration enforcement is a complex and emotional issue. Our responsibility tonight is to listen carefully, to examine the facts, and to craft thoughtful policy that balances legal obligations with our moral duty to protect our residents. Clear boundaries between federal immigration enforcement and our community are not obstruction. They are acts of governance. The legislation before us is rooted in the safety of our people and communities through the protection of public spaces, setting clear standards and protocols, and limiting unauthorized cooperation. I am proud of the resilience and diversity of our community. Immigrants, documented and undocumented, are our neighbors, business owners, students, parents, and essential workers. They contribute to our economy, our culture, and our shared future. Their dignity and their rights are not abstract principles. They are lived realities in our neighborhoods every day. Our responsibility tonight is to listen carefully, legislate thoughtfully, and to act lawfully. And tonight we begin that work together. Thank you all for being here. I want to pass the floor to Council President for opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I am grateful for everyone for being here. This is when ICE enforcement increased in Columbus, I said many will say that this is who we are, that we are a town that would be okay with it. And I said, no, the response to this is who Columbus is. And looking out on this crowd today, seeing the testimonies that we've already received, it speaks to who we are as a city. So I am very, very grateful from the bottom of our hearts for the work that you do, that Councilmember talked about. I certainly want to thank Councilmember Barroso de Padilla and President Pro Tem Dorans for your leadership on this legislative package. It has been thoughtful, it has been open, and it has been heartfelt, and proud to be here as well. I also want to thank our residents and the advocates and educators and faith leaders, business owners, and community partners who have taken the time to show up and engage in this conversation. Know that your presence matters. Know that your voice matters. Yes, we are here today to talk about protecting our community from aggressive immigration enforcement practices. But I also want to be clear that this conversation is about more than just immigration policy. This is about who we are as a city, our humanity. It's about economic development, because cities thrive when people feel safe going to work, opening businesses, and investing their future. Fear does not grow small businesses. Fear does not attract talent, and fear does not build a strong local economy. It's also about safety, because a city is less safe when parents are afraid to drive their children to school, when workers are hesitant to report crimes, and when neighbors avoid interacting with public institutions that are meant to serve them. Know that it's about travel and tourism, because cities known for compassion, stability, and trust are places people want to visit, to learn in, and to return to. Know that it's about education and childcare and pre-K, because no parent or family should fear taking their child to school or to daycare. And at its core, it's about our shared humanity. Aggressive enforcement tactics do not happen in a vacuum. They ripple out into our schools, our hospitals, our workplaces, our churches, and our neighborhoods. When members of our community are treated as disposable or undeserving of dignity, it weakens the moral fabric that holds all of us together. And we must be honest about that. This hearing is about protecting our neighbors when federal enforcement crosses the line. Cities have both the right and the responsibility to say how something is done matters just as much as what is done. In my faith tradition, we are reminded that every person is created in the image of God, that truth places dignity not on paperwork, not on status, not on where someone was born, but on their humanity. I was thinking about this today as we honor an important ancestor in our community who passed away yesterday. To echo the poem of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who reminded us again and again, I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be young, but I am somebody. I may be undocumented, but I am somebody. I speak a different language, but I must be respected, protected, and never rejected. I am God's child. Those words aren't just poetic. They set a moral standard, reminding us that dignity isn't granted by policy or paperwork. When we fail to honor that, when families are living in fear, when workers are targeted, when children are scared, we are not just failing a single group, we're failing ourselves. So today's hearing is about listening, it's about accountability, it's about understanding the real world impacts of aggressive enforcement on our city's safety, on our city's economy, and our city's future. And it's about affirming clearly and unapologetically that Columbus will always strive to lead with dignity, fairness, and our humanity. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your voices. Thank you for standing up for your neighbors. It's now my honor to turn the floor over to our leader, our co-leaders on this, President Pro Tem Rob Dorans.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate folks who have taken time out of their day to be here with us here tonight. Also want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla, who, if you ever wondered what representation matters, it matters in a moment like this to have a colleague that has spent most of her adult life organizing in the immigrant refugee community, and being here today to bring that advocacy to bear in a moment like this is something that cannot be replaced, that is so incredibly important to this body, to me personally, to have someone to rely upon in moments like this, to think about policy that is within our control in order to be able to make a meaningful change in our community to protect people. So thank you. Here tonight, we're going to hear from a variety of different folks across the city. The partnership that we've talked about here at Council could not be achieved without our folks within our Legislative Research Office, folks within the Division of Police, within the Department of Public Safety, Building and Zoning Services, so many folks across administration that has contributed along with the City Attorney's Office to be able to really identify key areas that we believe that this council, this city, can take meaningful steps forward to protect our residents from chaos. And I mean that. We've seen across the country where this immigration enforcement has led to chaos on the streets, has led chaos into families. While we can't control all this, what we can do as a community is do our best to protect one another in a moment like this. That's why it's so important for a discussion like this to consider legislation that does our best to address what the city can control, while also acknowledge things outside of our control, and make sure that we are empowering residents to be smart, to be thoughtful about how they're interacting with their family, their neighbors, and ultimately folks that they may interact with on the street. I want to thank, again, our folks across council from the staff standpoint that have helped really bring us to this place here tonight to be able to really review this legislation for the first time publicly and bring before council for a vote in the coming week. So with that, I want to pause and see if any of my council colleagues have anything they'd like to add at this time. Seeing none, I will turn it back over to my colleague.
Thank you, Pro Tem. I also just want to thank both of you and our council for your partnership in this and your leadership in making this happen. I think when we started to understand, when we saw Haitian TPS at risk, and then there was a stay, we know that Somali TPS is going to be up in March. We knew that we needed to act fast. I would argue that we're already behind. And so the measures that we are taking today are what is within our control. I want to thank all of you who, again, have been partners in this work, all of you who do this work, live this work. When I look out in this chamber today, what I see is Columbus. This is Columbus. And the fact that we are standing up for each other, that we are a community that says we are going to stand united for each other's humanity means a lot. That's all I'm going to say. I was going to tell a personal story, but I'm not going to do that because you already know. Okay, so here's how tonight is going to work. So we are going to hear a series of presentations. First, we're going to hear from the Ohio Immigrant Alliance. We're going to hear from the Columbus Division of Police. We're going to hear from the Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. And then we're going to head into, they're essentially going to give us the case of why, what are our policies and procedures, what is it that we currently do, what can folks expect. We're going to ask some questions. The floor is open to all of my colleagues to ask questions along the way because this is a meaty hearing. And so we're not going to wait till questions till the end because we'll all forget the questions that we had. So then we're going to kick it over to our Legislative Research Office, who will present the different pieces of legislation that we are proposing. And then from there, we will move to public testimony. We have a whopping, I believe, 21 folks from the community who want to speak, and we want to make sure that we give them all their due. How public testimony will work is that we will announce the person who is up and the person who is on deck. Just as a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Please stick to those 3 minutes so that everyone gets the opportunity to be heard when you come up to the podium. So if you need to make some adjustments, you got some time. Okay, and with that, I am excited to introduce our first presentation from the Ohio Immigrant Alliance. It's the Executive Director, Lynn Tremonte. Lynn, tell me if I mispronounce your name. And Lynn is joining us virtually. So Lynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Hardin and members of the Council. My name is Lynn Tremonti. I serve as Executive Director of the Ohio Immigrant Alliance. OIA is a coalition of immigrants and allies working around the state to defend the dignity and rights of all who call Ohio home. Through grassroots organizing, volunteerism, and community partnerships, we connect communities across Ohio to strengthen our collective voice and build a more just and inclusive future. We coordinate a statewide network of organizations and leaders to protect immigrants' rights. We monitor conditions in immigration jails, and we operate the Ohio Immigrant Hotline, where individuals can report abuses or seek assistance. This means the information that I'm bringing forward today is grounded not only in data, but in the realities people are living in Ohio right now. This is our home. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about how immigration arrests and detention are operating in Ohio and how local jurisdictions are participating in mass deportation. The information I'm presenting today is a subset from a forthcoming analysis of immigration and customs enforcement arrests, detentions, and deportations across Ohio during the first year of the second Trump administration. We will publish our complete analysis this spring. It offers answers to longstanding gaps in publicly accessible person-level data to bring transparency. So we're grateful to preview the data here. As you know, Ohio counties play a significant role in the civil immigration jail network. These are not people being accused of crimes. These are people who may have civil immigration cases pending. Our research shines a light into how immigration jail functions in the state, and I really want us to understand what we're talking about. Immigrants can be detained in a criminal jail while their civil cases are pending. They are not being accused of crimes while they are in these jails. And in most cases, their detention is not mandatory. It's at the discretion of the federal government, which is why immigration jail numbers have skyrocketed during the Trump administration. They are using detention as a weapon. The purpose of immigration jail is supposed to be to protect the public, but our analysis shows that the people we are detaining in Ohio pose no threat to anybody. The Trump administration's policy goal is actually to disadvantage immigrants with cases so that it's harder for them to obtain legal counsel or build a defense to their deportation. Rather than facing indefinite detention in a jail, possibly for years, many Columbus residents are agreeing to give up on their cases so that they can get their liberty back. This includes people who have paths to legal status through laws written by Congress. It is a thumb on the scale in a system that is already unfair. I'm going to share a couple slides. Screen. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to do a good job at that. I'm not the most tech-savvy person. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. So mass deportation cannot happen without the participation of municipalities and counties who profit off of the arrest and detention of people who, again, are not being charged with crimes. These are civil cases, not criminal. It's turning pain into profit. The Butler County Jail makes at least $105 per day or more for each person it incarcerates for ICE. The jail is planning to bring in $11 million in revenue for 2025 and maybe even $22 million in 2026. Butler County is in southwestern Ohio, but it's relevant to Columbus because that is where most central Ohioans are being sent after they are arrested by ICE. We did an analysis during Operation Buckeye, the Trump administration's onslaught against Columbus residents just before the Christmas holiday. And we found that 50% of the people arrested by ICE in central Ohio were sent to the Butler County Jail. Between February and mid-October in 2025, this jail accounted for more than 1/3 of all detentions across all 6 facilities in Ohio. So as you can see, local participation in federal immigration enforcement is central to mass deportation. It provides the bones of the system. It also means that local officials have the power to not participate in a policy that's destroying families and communities. Since the beginning of President Trump's second term, 4,568 people have been detained in Ohio on civil immigration charges. Of these, 1,391 have active immigration cases and 2,956 received final deportation orders from an immigration court. 3,924 people were Hispanic, and 4,130 are men. Only 1,200 even had a most serious conviction charge listed on their record, meaning that they have some sort of a criminal history, which can include a traffic offense. Of those, only 255 had a charge that would be classified as violent under the NCIC offense codes 0901 through 1399, 1601, 2099, 3612, 5214, and 5215. So this means that the overwhelming majority of people in immigration jail in Ohio do not have criminal histories, much less violent histories. Here we're looking at the combined length of stay, and again, looking at people that had any sort of criminal history or not. Not only are individuals without a criminal history being arrested at the highest rate, but they're spending more time in detention compared to people who actually do have criminal convictions. The median length of stay for people without a criminal history was 29 days, while individuals with a nonviolent criminal charge spent 21 days in immigration jail, and individuals with a violent conviction on their record spent 25 days before they were deported. So the average individual detained in Ohio on civil immigration charges is a 35-year-old single man from Mexico with no criminal history who was deported after spending 27 days in immigration jail at our expense across 2 separate facilities in different parts of the United States. But averages cannot capture the range of experiences. One of the most extreme cases we found was a 23-year-old man from Vietnam who was initially detained in Eloy, Arizona. Over 324 days, he was transferred to Butler County Jail in Ohio, Monroe County Inmate Dormitory in Michigan, Adams County Correctional Center in Mississippi, and Port Isabel Detention Center in Texas. His only charge was entering the United States without a visa. He has no criminal record. So think about this. He was detained on November 18th, 2024, received a final order of removal on September 9th, 2025, and was deported in October 2025. All of those days we were paying for him to be in jail, and all of that time he was away from his family. You can read our book, Broken Hope, Deportation and the Road Home, for more examples, and most importantly, information on the experience of deportation and its aftermath. So many Ohio families are broken by the government action of deportation, even when individuals concerned also qualify for legal status. For example, by being married to a U.S. citizen, you can be eligible for legal status and deportation at the same time. And the choice of which one the government picks is a political decision. The Trump administration believes indiscriminate mass deportation should be the policy that they are carrying out, and they're doing it with the help of local officials. Quickly, I'm going to provide a very quick snapshot of arrest patterns across some of the big Ohio communities. This data is only between January 20th and October 15th, 2025. Our report that we're releasing this spring will have full data for the entire first year of the Trump administration. But during that time period, Cleveland had 351 immigration arrests. And again, these are civil charges, not criminal. Columbus had 421, plus we know an additional 280 people arrested during Operation Buckeye, which makes the total at least 701 from Columbus. Cincinnati had 849 arrests. Other parts of the state, there were 2,799 arrests documented. In each of these jurisdictions and data sets, individuals with no criminal history represent the largest share of arrests by a huge margin. Sorry, I didn't flip through those slides quick as I was talking. We'll make sure the slides are available publicly. I'd also like to talk about the experience of immigration jail just for a moment. While on paper, it says that this is civil detention, it still takes place in a criminal jail. People are being held there and they're not serving a criminal sentence. They're waiting for a civil immigration court to render a decision on their deportability or release them. It's actually an indefinite sentence. And they are still subject to the same treatment as somebody incarcerated for committing a crime: deprivation of liberty, disconnection from loved ones and legal support, substandard food, the need to pay for the simple act of making a phone call or ordering appropriate clothing, hygiene products, and edible food. Many of the people we have heard from in immigration jail at the Ohio Immigrant Hotline have chronic health conditions, including cancer and diabetes, and are getting no treatment. Jailers are financially disincentivized to provide health care, including expensive cancer drugs, so they ignore immigrants' medical conditions. We know people who are being deported in worse health than when they entered immigration jail, people who are not getting diabetes medication and are losing their eyesight because they spent time in immigration jail. A lot of times they had private insurance from the outside because they were working legally. They have been here for decades. But that insurance coverage doesn't work in immigration jail. Healthcare is technically supposed to be paid for by the jailers or the taxpayers. But the jailers don't want to spend a penny more than what they have to. They cut costs and corners to the detriment of individuals' health. Civil immigration jail is morally bankrupt. Ohio counties and cities should protect their residents and demand that Congress pass fair immigration laws, not assist the federal government with mass deportation through mass incarceration. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. I think that that data is startling. We heard from folks that didn't believe that folks were getting detained, or, that's why I started this hearing with, we want to start in fact. And I think that gives us a basis for us to start to have this conversation so we really understand what we're talking about. I want to open it up first to my colleagues. Do folks have any questions for Lynn? Yes, Councilmember.
I recently had a conversation at a community meeting with an immigration attorney who said her client did not receive a proper amount of food at Butler, that they are not meeting the standards that are expected in jails in the United States for feeding inmates. Is that true? Or do you have any documentation? I know it's...
That's true. Oh, I'm sorry.
I know that Butler County has not been cooperative about allowing people to inspect.
It's absolutely true that people are not being fed proper meals at Butler County Jail. They get fed twice a day. The food is inedible. It's basically animal food. And Sheriff Jones thinks that's funny. He says, you're in jail. What are you expecting? A 5-course meal. So again, you've got people spending $15 per meal on this a la carte hot food service just so they can get something partly edible in the jail there. Being detained is very expensive for families, and that adds up to the stresses and costs, and it's exactly why President Trump is putting more people in jail, to make it expensive for them so that they give up on their cases and just agree to leave.
I think one of the other, thank you, Councilmember, did that answer? I think one of the other things that's also important to underscore is that these are civil cases and not criminal cases, which is, I think, a misnomer that many folks have in the community, is that they believe that this is a criminal case when indeed it is not, that immigration cases are civil. And Lynn said it best. This is a political decision to hold people in detention centers, and especially when you're holding them in criminal in criminal detention centers where the conditions are challenging, where we are not taking care of them. And I think the conversation about Butler County is another conversation for another day, but thank you, Lynn, for painting that picture for us and for folks to have the data about what is happening here. I want to, again, just make sure that folks got that data. 700 people were detained from Columbus. 700 people were detained. That's like 2 of our high schools of people. So I want that to sink in for folks as we continue to have this conversation, because I think it feels like a very abstract idea, like we're not actually talking about people and families and communities and how that affects all of us. So President Pro Tem, I'll hand it over to you for the next part of our presentations.
If you don't mind, I did have a question for Lynn. So Lynn, one of the things I've seen on media reports and both in Columbus and across the country talk about sort of the chaotic nature of some of these enforcement actions is, again, American citizens or other individuals that have legal status here getting swept up in all this and the disruption that happens to that individual and their families. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what the organization has seen as far as that when we just think about, again, sort of the chaotic nature that we've seen not only here in Columbus and Ohio, but also across the country.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because let's think about this. Civil immigration laws or civil laws are normally enforced in a courtroom and an office building and through paper back and forth. There's mediation, there's a coming together between the parties and a resolution. You don't have tax law enforcers out in the community with guns looking for people they think might not have paid their taxes. That would be outrageous for that to happen. Immigration laws are civil. They should be handled in a courtroom, in an office building, not out in the middle of the community. We have received videos of people's cars, all of their windows being smashed out by ICE as a ruse to get them to come outside. You saw the videos and you heard about the horrible car accident that ICE caused in Columbus during Operation Buckeye because they were racially profiling people driving down the street. And they saw a man who was brown and they decided to chase him at a high rate of speed. I don't know about you all, but when I was growing up and learning how to drive, my parents told me, if you see somebody chasing you in a car and it's not a marked police car, you do not pull over. You keep driving until to the nearest police station because it could be somebody who is pretending they're law enforcement to kidnap you. That's how ICE is acting. They're using the criminal tactics of predators in our communities, and it makes all of us unsafe. It's extremely inappropriate. And what we need is civil immigration laws enforced with cool heads in a courtroom and in an office building, not in the streets of Columbus.
Thank you. Any other questions from council colleagues?
Just one. And Lynn, thank you for the overview and the report on what is happening. I wanted to ask a question around these reports that the federal government is purchasing warehouse space to detain folks. Are those numbers reflected in what you have presented? Are there concerns and fear that even if we move folks out of the criminal jail to locations that are not set up for safe and health reasons, conditions will be even worse?
So thank you for asking that. Those detention figures are not included in our current data set because we're only talking about the capacity we have now. The Trump administration increased immigration jail capacity over 1,000% from the Biden administration in Ohio. So, and again, if you build it, they will fill it. They are looking for people to put in these jails who are just here trying to take care of their families. There should be a different process. There should be a way for people to remediate and to get legal status. There should be paths to compliance in the law like there is in any other civil enforcement scheme. And that's where we need to take this conversation is towards what can we do differently? What would be humane and safe for everybody in our community?
Any other questions, council members? Seeing none, we'll move us on. As we just heard, this community has worked so incredibly hard over the last 6+ years about bringing law enforcement and the community closer together. And not that it's ever perfect, but it is certainly something that our leadership within the Division of Police and Public Safety have embraced and really worked towards making sure that there's a far more collaborative relationship between our officers, our folks in safety, and our residents. And we wanted to make sure that our Division of Police was here this evening, and our safety leadership to talk about sort of their role in this as a city. So I wanted to turn it over now to Assistant Chief Convez and Deputy Director George Speaks.
Thank you, President Hardin, members of council. First and foremost, let me underscore and emphasize the Columbus Division of Police is not a partnering agency under Section 287 with ICE. In stark contrast, in 2017, Mayor Ginther issued a city executive order that directs city departments not to use city resources, including police, to enforce federal immigration law or assist in immigration enforcement solely based on someone's immigration status. Columbus will only engage with ICE or work on federal immigration matters when there is evidence of a criminal offense or there's a judicial court order. And by that I mean an arrest warrant issued by a court. The mayor's policy also states that city services will not be denied to residents based upon where they're born.
The executive order has been memorialized in our Division Directive 3.01, which states in pertinent part, sworn personnel shall not arrest or detain persons based solely on immigration status or for immigration and customs enforcement unless a warrant exists or a criminal violation was observed. Now, given that directive, here is what the Columbus Division of Police does not do. We don't provide information to ICE agents for the purpose of locating a person solely for civil immigration enforcement actions. We don't assist in the removal or transportation of people in immigration enforcement proceedings. We don't self-deploy to any immigration enforcement-related events. We don't participate in detaining people based solely on immigration status or assist in any civil immigration enforcement actions. We don't escort federal immigration agents to enforcement locations. And we don't close streets when there are no traffic or public safety issues. As was previously stated, Chief Bryant and the men and women of the Division of Police have worked so hard to strengthen safety and trust within our community, and the results have been overwhelming. It is very clear that we are seeing record drops in violent crime with the lowest homicide rate in years, and strong partnerships with our community are a big reason for that. We have seen just over and over and over again, we are getting more tips, more people coming forward when they witness violent crime. They feel comfortable working with the Division of Police, and we are very proud of that, and we anticipate continuing that moving forward.
So there are many reasons that buttress and underscore the mayor's executive order and our division policy. In short, local police are most effective when residents trust them. It's as simple as that. Immigration enforcement by local law enforcement reduces cooperation, it increases legal liability, it diverts resources away from public safety priorities. Priorities such as addressing violent crime, traffic enforcement, illegal drug enforcement, domestic violence, burglary, and property crimes. We thank you for the opportunity to once again reiterate the mayor's executive order, our Division of Police directive, and for allowing us to expound on the many policy reasons that underscore these documents. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to see if my colleagues have any questions for safety. Councilmember Ross?
Just a couple questions, Assistant Chief Convis. You mentioned that the Division of Police does not work with ICE immigration unless there is some sort of nexus to criminal activity. Can you explain specifically what you mean by criminal activity? Does that include low-level criminal offenses that carry with it very minor jail time, disciplinary, or are we talking violent crime, those types of situations?
Yeah, when I say about our interaction with ICE, it's not, we don't go out on operations with ICE. They operate solely independent on their own. Where we interface with ICE is when we have a warrant or we have somebody under arrest for a criminal violation that is taken to the jail. That is the only time that information is passed along via the jail to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We are not out in the street doing enforcement operations with them for any level of offense, criminally.
Could that arrest warrant be for a low-level criminal offense? Are you talking about arrest warrants for felony crimes of violence?
Yeah, it could be for any type of arrest warrant for a criminal violation is when it gets reported to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And we never ID someone solely to determine their immigration status. We don't make traffic stops and ask for their immigration status. We never do that. There has to be a criminal reason for the stop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ross. Any other colleagues? Councilmember Green?
Hi, y'all. I recognize you might not have a great answer to this question, but I wanted to, and I apologize if this is putting you on the spot, but I think this is something that I'm trying to sort of wrap my mind around too, is what what constitutes criminal activity. And when we observe, individuals who say that they are federal law enforcement, engaging in actions and activities that appears to be in violation of the law, how are we sort of thinking through the contradiction there, the conflict there, in terms of, what is our role in enforcement? What is our role in intervention when we see somebody being assaulted by someone wearing a Customs and Border Patrol vest in our streets?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So generally speaking, Division of Police personnel are coming into these encounters very late, and generally we are not contacted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for assistance. Generally, it's going to be someone from the community calling in because they are, blocking streets, or it's generally a protest in response to some type of Immigration and Customs Enforcement action. And so our folks are going to follow, our normal procedures for protests. They're going to follow our normal procedures for any type of crowd management, enforce a law. If there's a fight in the crowd, sure, they may take enforcement action, but we haven't seen that. We've had very limited even calls to these types of enforcement actions when back through even December, when we saw the huge influx of folks coming in from ICE. But again, we're not generally present during the initial encounters of ICE and these individuals on their enforcement actions because we don't work with them, we don't respond with them. It's a call generally later from someone in the public, and then we handle it if it's an arrestable offense or we have to break up a fight or something. We will follow our normal procedures to do so and take care of it that way.
I think to be a little bit more explicit, and I'm glad that this is something that we haven't encountered yet. I think when we're looking around the country, we can see what appears to be violence that is being perpetrated by Customs and Border Patrol. So at what point do we have a duty to protect the citizens of Columbus that might be being harmed by these individuals? Is this a policy thing that we are thinking through, I guess, as we're preparing potential scenarios where there would be a point where we would try to intervene or try to de-escalate even between those two entities, and a constituent and CPB agent?
Yeah, so all of our officers, and this is fairly new in the last couple of years, we have gone through what's called ABLE training, active bystander for law enforcement, and that is bystander and duty to intervene with other officers, and that's not only just with CPD, but whoever we run into. If we see something that is appearing that not right, we tell our officers they have a duty to intervene and at least, somehow try to break that officer's concentration to get them to think about what they're doing and try to intervene. And I trust that our officers will use that training. We've already seen uses of that training just in the city of Columbus with our personnel. It's been, we've seen great results from it. So they are trained in active bystandership and are expected to, follow that training.
Any other questions of council members?
Just one more, I apologize. Assistant Chief, you went down a list of things that CPD does not do, and I presume you're reading that from CPD directives or an SOP that you have with regard to operations. What is the accountability in the event that an officer is found to have done the things that you have listed you do not do? Is it we have discretion, we're not going to do it, or is it you shall not do it, and there are accountability measures that will take place in the event that an officer is found doing that?
Yeah, for just like any of our other division directives, if somebody violates it, in fact, it says sworn personnel shall not. And so that is very explicit. It's not a should not, it is a you shall not do something. So if we have an officer that is, let's say, making traffic stops just to determine immigration status, we would handle that the same way we would any other rule violation. It would be investigated by internal affairs, or if it's an external citizen complaint, that would go through the Department of Inspector General, and then the chain of command would get it. And if it is a sustained violation, we would expect discipline to come with that.
Can you briefly explain what the community can do if they are observing this, or if they think they have observed this? Who are they calling? How can they make that complaint so that accountability is had?
Sure. Any citizen complaint can go to the Department of Inspector General. They can email dig.gov. They can contact, it's available online. They can just type in Columbus Department of Inspector General and they'll get the phone number. They can show up in person to the Inspector General office. They'll take a complaint anyway. Even if they contact the Internal Affairs Bureau, we will pass that complaint over. And we do sometimes get people that call our Internal Affairs Bureau to file complaints. We will immediately pass that over to the Department of Inspector General for investigation.
And what I will say, even if it's a council member's email address that you have or staff, we are still considered the city. We will also make sure that either Internal Affairs or the Department of Inspector General gets that complaint as well. Thank you.
Other question, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla?
I have two questions as well. The first one is, as we were looking at this piece of legislation, or different pieces of legislation, we were looking at the prevention of city employees working for ICE. Can CPD officers go and take a second job with ICE, or can they take a side job, or can you tell me what your policies are around that?
Sure. All secondary employment is required to be approved by the chief of police. So she lays eyes, Chief Brent lays eyes on every single request for secondary employment. The one type of secondary employment we do not allow would be somebody to hold an active law enforcement commission and be enforcing laws, elsewhere while they are a CPD officer. That's not allowed.
So they cannot work with ICE?
That's correct.
They cannot have a second job?
That is correct.
My other question is, I want to illustrate, this was the example that was given to me, so this is why I'm asking the question. If ICE is on the scene, they are in the process of detaining someone, the car accident that Lynn referred to, where there was a car crash, and then people called because of the crash, that was why CPD was on the scene. So is that a good example of, to the point that my fellow council members were making, when CPD might be called because there was another criminal offense, or there was some sort of reason why you then needed to call CPD because there was an action that happened at that point, that's why they might have been on the scene?
That's
that
correct. Yes.
Thank you. Assistant Chief, so just a couple questions. I mean, I think one of the chaotic natures of all of this is that you have folks from outside the community oftentimes coming in, engage in law enforcement activity, and it's difficult to know who is who and who is doing what. And frankly, many of these folks have been dressed in a way that looks like they're suited up for war rather than being on the streets of Columbus. This body worked with the Leadership and Safety a number of years ago to change both officer identification and sort of the types of uniforms that our division of police officers wear. So you can talk a little bit about, again, just to help members of the community start to better understand, if we have a bunch of folks that randomly show up in Columbus and they've got, police, across their chests, and they're all in Army fatigues and holding, what looks like automatic weapons, how that person is very different compared to what our officers wear, how they identify themselves, what they're allowed to obscure, what they're allowed to have with them. Can you just talk about the difference of those things so our community can better understand, again, when they're seeing a Columbus Division of Police officer versus someone else?
Sure. Yeah, our uniforms are very specific. Now, we do have different iterations depending on the type of jobs which is required. Our bike officers look different than a patrol officer. Same with freeway patrol. Like a freeway patrol has reflective striping for safety on the freeway, things of that nature. But there are some commonalities among all of our uniforms. One, it'll always have a Columbus Police badge on the front of it. It will also always say Columbus Police, and it always will have the officer's badge number listed on the external most layer of that. We are not in the business at CPD of having unmarked police officers jumping out on folks and taking enforcement action. In fact, we have since changed that many years ago because of it's just not safe for officers. It's not safe for the public. And so we have folks in marked uniforms. It should be very clear who the Columbus Division of Police personnel are when they are taking enforcement action.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, I will hand it back to Councilmember Barroso de Padilla.
Thank you, Pro Tem. And next, I'm excited to have our commissioners from the Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs with a presentation. Commissioners, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Immigrants and refugees are the heart of what makes Columbus and our nation the strong and vibrant community it is today. Immigrants fuel our economy, enrich our culture, and help shape the future of Columbus through resilience, innovation, and contributions that strengthen the fiber of our community. Yet for so long, immigrant and refugee communities have not had a formal, consistent seat at the table when it comes to influencing city policies and decision. The Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs was created to change that. This commission was established following the recommendations of the Immigrants Make Columbus Project, a research initiative led by the Ohio State University College of Social Work in partnership with the Office of Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. This commission now serves as a direct bridge between immigrant communities and immigrant communities and the city leadership, creating a platform for advocacy, collaboration, and meaningful community-informed change. The Commission's Policy and Advocacy Committee acknowledges that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, including Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection, has deployed thousands of federal agents in large-scale operations across the country, including Columbus, in what was known as Operation Buckeye, with few guardrails resulting in racial profiling, intimidation, harassment, and death in the country's immigrant and refugee communities. As the advisory arm of Columbus City Council, we work to amplify the voices of immigrants and refugees in advancing policies that promote inclusion, accountability, and public trust. Since our appointment to this commission, our commissioners have attended countless community events where the collective voice from our youth, our elders, and our allies have consistently shared feeling unsafe, disconnected, and fearful of leaving their homes. We, as a commission, are pushing a resolution that helps combat the feelings of feeling unsafe and hoping to restore connection in our community. I'm going to pass it over to Commissioner Tasha Lomo to share more details.
Oh, there it is. The Commission's Policy and Advocacy Committee recognizes the need for accountability amongst federal immigration law enforcement. This resolution is our call to align standard local and state law enforcement policies with the regulations for federal agents conducting civil immigration enforcement. Resolution ICE Out recommends the following: that all federal agents conducting civil immigration enforcement operations and otherwise interacting with residents should visibly display identification, including their name and the respective federal agency they represent. Vehicles used for these operations should be clearly marked with their respective federal agency's official seal and lettering. That all federal agents should refrain from wearing non-medical face coverings, including gaiters, balaclavas, and other tactical face coverings while conducting civil immigration enforcement operations and otherwise interacting with residents. That the Department of Homeland Security should ensure that all ICE agents deployed in Columbus and nationwide should be trained to the restored standard of 22 weeks in line with other federal law enforcement training. That the Department of Homeland Security and all federal agents engaging in civil immigration enforcement and interacting with residents should otherwise conduct themselves in accordance with all applicable local, state, and federal laws and the U.S. Constitution. That the Department of Homeland Security and all federal agents interact with the residents of Columbus and nationwide in a civil manner and refrain from using lethal force. Our hope is that this resolution will be a step in the right direction to protect the rights of Columbus residents and set a precedent for other states and cities to continue to do the same. We would love for Columbus City Council to review this resolution in hopes to consider adoption. Thank you for your time and consideration.
So I want to thank the commissioners. I know at our commission meetings, this is something that we had been talking about even before we talked about the pieces of legislation. I also want to take it over to our city attorney's office for just a second because we did consider this as legislation. And can you talk a little bit about why this could not be a piece of legislation and why we chose the route of the resolution?
Thank you, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. A number of the recommendations that are being made for federal operations within the City of Columbus are not within the jurisdictional authority of the City of Columbus Council. We do not have the ability or authority to mandate any particular standards of training for federal agencies. The Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution prohibits us from enforcing a number of the other provisions that, while recommended and certainly are part of what our law enforcement does within the City of Columbus, are not within our ability to specifically mandate or control.
And I want to take it over to our director of our Legislative Research Office, because we did explore what other cities, what best practices they might have taken. And I believe that this is what most cities, I know Springfield also did a resolution. Is that correct, Director?
That's my understanding, yes, Councilmember.
So I want to thank the commission for all of their hard work and the research and the time and intention that they put into this. This is also one of them that I think if it was within our jurisdiction, we certainly would have done this, because these are the strategies and the tactics that we think are most harmful. And so I want to thank the commission for their intention. I think this carries even more power because it came from the people, and we will certainly present this for adoption on Monday at our council meeting. And so I want to thank you all for the work that you did. I want to open the floor to my colleagues if there's any additional questions or comments. Yes. Councilmember.
Not a question, but a comment. My hope is that if this resolution passes, this is something we share with federal legislators who should be doing their job to protect residents of Ohio. So that would be my only ask, that if this passes, this is something that is sent to them.
Absolutely. And I would also say, and Councilmember Green, I see you, I'm coming down to you in just a second. I would also say that for all of our residents who are watching, all the folks who are here, that this is another point of advocacy, that you can reach out to our leaders in Washington, and you can advocate for these protections. I mean, this is part of the reason they held back some of the funding for ICE, is that ICE needs better enforcement. And so these are some of the things that we can all advocate for together. So Councilmember Green.
Question for the City Attorney's Office. Thank you, Chair. If we observe or violations of federal policy are documented in Columbus, is it the intention of the City Attorney's Office to then pursue legal action? I recognize that we cannot, enforce them through legislative action, but certainly if violations of their own policies that then put the lives of our residents in jeopardy occur, is that something that the City Attorney's Office is looking at, how they might respond to that if that were to come to pass, as it has in other cities?
Thank you, Councilmember Green. The City Attorney's Office has been engaged with the council and with the administration on a number of legislative fronts to assure that to the extent that we are able and we are restrained in our ability to pursue all courses of litigation, because we must demonstrate standing, the ability to sue. But to the extent that we are able, we have brought litigation already in a number of different courts across the nation, attempting to protect the City of Columbus and its residents. And would there be circumstances where such violations were to occur, we would review those specific instances and determine whether or not we would have standing to sue or not.
Also, I just want to be clear about my intent in asking that question. I'm not, I don't think we should be fishing for things, right? I just think that we have observed, we have witnessed what's been happening around the United States, and we have an opportunity to consider best case scenarios and worst case scenarios now. And so I am grateful to know that your department is being proactive in making sure that our residents are encountered with dignity and respect that they all deserve, no matter where they're from. Thank you.
Any other questions? So again, I want to thank our commissioners for being here. I am excited to present the resolution on Monday for the hopeful adoption from my council colleagues. And with that, Pro Tem, I hand it back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I want to introduce Director Matt Erickson from our Legislative Research Office. Him and his staff has worked tirelessly over the past several weeks in order to really evaluate the different options that were in front of this body to be considered, the pros and cons as we sort of worked through these with the administration and the city attorney's office. And so I just again want to thank him and his staff for working so diligently and so quickly in order to allow us to have this hearing here today to consider these pieces of legislation. So with that, Director Erickson, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity for my staff and I to come and talk about some of these policies that we've been working on and to go through a handful of them in consideration ahead of Monday's meeting. There are certainly some items that are further along than others, and we're happy to talk about that. Happy to take questions from council members as we go through each of these. Also strongly encourage council members to direct questions to the CPD as well as the city attorney's office as well, wherever it might be relevant. Mark, you want to throw that back up? So we're going to talk about some of the immigration enforcement response policies that the Legislative Research Office has been working on. We're going to walk through right now what's on the slate, prohibiting 287G agreements. Again, I'm going to talk about each of these individually, but establishing an evidence gathering repository, staging and use of public spaces, essentially ICE's presence in public spaces and in non-public spaces as well, obstruction and harassment at schools and daycare centers, secondary employment prohibition, and then a detention center special use permit policy that's under consideration. I just want to talk for a moment about some of the principles that really informed our consideration of some of these policies. I think it's been discussed a number of times so far in this hearing, but first and foremost, there's the overriding reality that there is existing federal supremacy via the Constitution, and its limits or inhibits or truly informs what it is that the city can do from a response policy and in particular an enforcement policy. Want to note, I cited a recent report by a staff attorney in the State Democracy Research Institute that, of course, federal enforcement officials, law enforcement officials do enjoy a form of immunity, but it is not total and complete immunity. That if immigration enforcement officials, if there is documented evidence of them committing transgressions of federal, state, or local law, they will be subject to prosecution just like anybody else. But obviously, it greatly informs how we're going to craft these policies when we're talking about how it is that we can actually execute and administer them. We wanted to be thoughtful about administration, so my staff and I have been working with a number of different departments that would have some role in administering some of these. We certainly wanted to be informed by the experience of other cities that have had an ICE presence and enforcement activities within their jurisdiction. We have seen a lot of other cities roll out policy packages in various flavors, and trying to adapt some of those for a Columbus-based implementation was certainly one of our overriding factors. And then notably, especially for, when we get into talking about some of these, we had to strike a balance to a degree between protecting the residents while also protecting city employees. And by that, what we really mean is, I don't think it was in council's interest to craft policies that would potentially put our own city employees in an impossibly difficult situation. And so we certainly wanted to be thoughtful about how we crafted those so that we didn't put any of our own employees at risk. I'm going to talk first about prohibiting 287G agreements. Ms. Tremonti sort of alluded to this in the very beginning. You've seen a dramatic increase in the utilization of 287G agreements. For anybody who is not aware, I spelled out here, 287G agreement is basically an intergovernmental agreements between ICE and a local law enforcement agency, to a degree effectively deputizing local law enforcement to conduct immigration enforcement activities. It's been around for quite some time, almost 30 years now. As CPD noted, this is not something that they currently utilize, the 287G agreements between CPD and ICE. However, it's probably not technically prohibited under the 2017 ordinance that council adopted around immigration enforcement. And as you're seeing, especially with a recent report by FWD, these are sort of an integral aspect of ICE's enforcement activities. You're seeing a over 900% increase in the utilization of 287Gs nationwide. And so the draft code under consideration right now would effectively prohibit CPD from entering into 287G agreements absent approval by Columbus City Council. Questions or comments?
So, Director Erickson, we heard from the Division of Police and Public Safety earlier that there is not a agreement currently in place, nor has there been. So, in essence, this legislation would, one, if in fact that policy choice were to be made by the chief of police or the Division of Public Safety or Department of Public Safety, that would have to come before this body. So residents, that could not be an action that, would get buried and no one would know about it. That would be affirmatively, this body would have to take a vote saying, yes, we would allow you to enter into this. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct, President Pro Tem.
So again, this piece of legislation is ensuring that, one, that doesn't exist now. And if someone wanted to move in that direction, folks elected leadership would have to take a vote on that.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. So the evidence gathering repository, I had mentioned, and I think the city attorney's office alluded to this as well, but there is not broad immunity that ICE officers enjoy by virtue of their immigration enforcement activities. And we are currently considering directing the mayor's administration to establish an evidence gathering repository so that we can have a centralized space to gather collateral that could eventually be used for evidentiary purposes, for investigation by CPD, and potentially for referral for prosecution to either, obviously, the city attorney's office or to the county prosecutor's office. The current draft also includes a requirement that any officers that witness corresponding transgressions would be required to notify their supervisor, who would then be required to notify the city attorney's office. This is not a novel approach. You've seen similar policies proposed and implemented in other places. Again, in varying formats, you've had elected officials be, openly stating that they would intend to pursue prosecution if they see crimes being committed by immigration enforcement officials. There are concerns with this and why there's still some work that the LRO has to perform on this before we're ready to bring something forward. Obviously, we have concerns about public safety. This is sort of that balance between protecting residents and protecting employees. But I don't think council necessarily wants to be encouraging residents to actively get involved in enforcement activities when they see them. Certainly document, certainly record if there are transgressions that residents are witnessing, but we've also seen that can have tragic consequences in Minneapolis, and that's sort of what has informed our direction on this. There are issues around data integrity, data storage, the actual platform that might be used for this. And then we have some concerns around sort of the investigatory flow that this would follow. Again, this in of itself is somewhat novel, but we're still actively engaged in discussions between CPD, City Attorney's Office, the Prosecutor's Office, about the most effective way for us to really consider this if we can move forward with it.
Thank you, chairs, and thank you, Director. One of our, something that is unfortunate but is fortunate is that ICE's increased actions in other cities has come before Columbus. And to your point, there is a roadmap of how cities are responding. To your point, we would not be the first city to go down this road of creating a repository to collect citizen potential evidence. And the one thing that I think about is that but for brave Americans documenting in Minneapolis the murders of Ms. Good and Mr. Peretti, we might not even be in a situation to know the truth. I know that there are a lot of concerns and questions around how we would do this. Looking at other cities, Chicago, New Orleans, Philadelphia, that are, say, a month, 2 months ahead of us, what are the options for how one does this? Is it recommended as the city attorney? Maybe this is a question for the city attorney and the department. Are we more interested in housing this type of data internally, or are we more interested in housing this, in partnering with an outside agency to collect this? What direction are we collectively thinking out loud about, and what are the other concerns that one would consider and we have learned from other cities?
Council President, you've definitely highlighted a couple of the potential options that some other states and municipalities have engaged in, from just soliciting tips effectively or any other evidence that residents may have, to engaging with a third party, with a nonprofit, with another legal advocacy organization, and effectively deputizing them for the collection and transmittal of evidentiary collateral. So certainly that spectrum is certainly under consideration. I would defer to the Division of Police as well as the City Attorney's Office about what they think the most effective means or mechanism may be.
Thank you, President Hardin. Thank you, Mr. Erickson. And so it greatly depends upon what the intended use of the particular repository is to be. If we're thinking about it purely from the perspective of, has a crime been committed, and do we want to gather evidence of a crime, then we would want to be careful about chain of custody. We'd want to be careful about having, making sure that any video that is received or evidence that is received by the city is properly logged, retained, maintained, reviewed, investigated. And if it appears that a crime has occurred, that it goes down the normal path of being investigated to determine if there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. A number of the videos that have been provided across the country may not rise to the level of a crime. Certainly some obviously did, but others do not. But they maybe just document general behaviors. Then the question is going to be, again, who's going to review that to determine that it goes into one category versus another category and what its intended use is. It's fortunate that Columbus is thinking about this now, in the sense that we're trying to determine what might be the path forward or what we might need in the future. But I would also point out that some of the other cities that have created a repository are doing so specifically because they have already engaged and have already gone down the path specifically of going through litigation. In some of the other cities that were mentioned, Chicago as an example, we had National Guard deployment, and we had specific litigation that was related to that behavior as well as the ICE enforcement action. And so in that case, where there was ongoing litigation about specific activity on the ground already in progress, then it made sense for those law departments in particular who were engaged in the litigation to solicit that kind of video. At the moment, fortunately, we don't have that situation. So we have time to think about it, and we have time to decide what is the purpose for which we are gathering it, how are we going to maintain it, who's going to review it, and what obligations will that create. And so those are some of the conversations that we're having.
Can I ask another follow-up about that? So are we thinking through issues related to the repository if it's housed here of, potential issues if those cases end up going to court about attorney-client privilege, if they have legal representation? And also, are we thinking about issues related to, or government, our data is easily accessible, can be requested by others, whether or not that would be a risk to residents and their identities that might be submitting information, and versus if it was housed externally?
Thank you, Councilmember Green. That's a very valid point. So if evidence is provided to a law enforcement agency under an allegation that a crime may have been committed, then that evidence that is provided to the investigatory body and or to a prosecuting body, if it's gotten to that point, is going to be protected by clears protections under the Ohio Public Records Law, as well as work product on behalf of both investigatory and prosecutorial agencies. However, if the video is simply being provided to a governmental body without a particular allegation of crime, but simply to provide it, then like our 911 calls or like other things along those lines where those communications are made to a governmental body, they are public records. And so one of the very big considerations is how we are receiving those and for what purpose, because if it's received for criminal investigation, it's treated very differently under the Ohio public record laws than is if received simply because somebody decides to send us a video and send it to the city. If it is a public record, then anybody can request it and anybody can get it. And if there's information on there that might be of a sensitive nature to a particular individual, there are specific exemptions under the public records law for redacting aspects of that, such as social security numbers. But it may not protect an individual who, for instance, might be undocumented and is captured in that particular footage.
Thank you so much. I recognize we don't have all the answers today, but I'm just grateful to know that these are all really complex issues that we are thinking through, but also trying to resolve these questions quickly. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I was joined by my colleagues in the LRO, Kirsten Estosi and Sam Dooling. They've also been working hard on some of these policies. And I actually, Mark, if you want to put that back up, I want to pass this over to Sam.
Thank you very much, members of Columbus City Council, for allowing me to present on this policy. This language came initially from examples from Minneapolis and Chicago's separation ordinance. The draft prohibits any governmental personnel from using a parking lot, vacant lot, or garage controlled or operated by the City of Columbus as a staging area, processing location, operations base, or any other similar use to aid federal immigration law enforcement. Furthermore, the draft requires the Director of Finance and Management to install clear signage at such properties to that effect. Why the Director of Finance and Management? That department maintains quite a few city facilities, certainly not all. There are lots of other facilities that are under different departments like Recreation and Parks, so the draft attends to that by requiring cooperation among the different departments when the Director of Finance is installing such signage to reflect the policy. The Director is also required to determine which locations require something like physical barriers, locking gates. Additionally, the city, in addition to city-controlled parking lots, vacant lots, and garages, the draft prohibits federal immigration authorities from accessing restricted or semi-restricted spaces controlled by the city, such as employee-only city facilities and those that require security badge access. If federal immigration authorities attempt to enter such spaces, the expectation of city employees is that they would request proof of a judicial warrant or some other legal instrument proving the authority's right to enter. If an employee of the city becomes aware of collaboration with immigration enforcement authorities to identify city spaces for use by immigration officials, then the employee is required to report the violation to their department head and or human resources representative. Failure to do so may result in investigation or disciplinary action. And finally, the draft requires the Director of Finance and Management also to design signage for private property owners who elect to post signs on their own property to lawfully restrict access by immigration enforcement officials. So the Director must post that signage template as well as Know Your Rights materials to the city's official website and city bulletin. Before I pass it along, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sam, could you be more specific in city-owned spaces, just for folks have asked us, but can you just go down the list of what that would include? And then secondarily, what would the signage look like, and what specifically would the sign say for folks to, just for knowledge of what we're asking?
Thank you, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. The purpose, I think the basic intent of this legislation was to address whether immigration officials would be accessing particular types of city facilities. So the language that's generally employed in the draft as it stands right now is city controlled. There are some leases in which city property has been leased out and is under a current legal agreement with some other kind of party. So we tried to make it clear that any land the city controls, so the draft lists parking lots, vacant lots, garages, but those types of properties are controlled by different departments. This might include a city-owned parking garage under the Department of Public Service or Finance. This might include a parking lot that is at a recreation center. Many, many examples. I'm sure I'm missing quite a few. I'm happy to get a more exhaustive list if that would be helpful.
And then can you also talk about the restrictive or open spaces versus restrictive spaces? Just can you give examples of those?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. An example of a semi-restricted space, so that is defined in the policy to be basically a space where members of the public might not generally be expected to be, but are welcome as guests of an employee of the city. So, for example, I think my office in City Hall would be an example that's it's not like a lobby, but a guest who signs in to the security desk might be welcome into a semi-restricted space like mine. And then a restricted space, I think, is a little bit more stringent, might contain city server hardware, kind of firmware, something that's highly sensitive and protected, maybe some kind of archives, something that needs to be under greater security. And I'm happy to talk about the signage too, if you'd like.
Please.
Thank you, Councilmember. So right now, the draft language of the signage that would be required to be posted by the Director of Finance and Management at city-controlled properties would read, "This property is controlled by the City of Columbus. Per Chapter 155 of the Columbus City Codes, this property is not authorized for use in any civil immigration enforcement operations." And then similarly, signage that the Director of Finance and Management would be required to produce for any private property owners who may wish to post something similar would read, "This is private property. Per Chapter 155 of the Columbus City Codes, I, the property owner, assert my right not to authorize the use of this property in any civil immigration enforcement operations unless required by a judicial warrant or other provision of state or federal law. I assert this right under my own discretion and assume any legal risk associated therewith."
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Can you, and this may be better suited for our city attorney's office, but I do think that there is some importance in distinguishing between what is staging activity and what is enforcement activity, and what we should be looking out for with regard to this policy. So if you can give some examples of what does ICE immigration staging mean, and how is that different from enforcement, and does that have any implications on the city's authority to restrict that behavior?
Thank you so much, Councilmember Ross. I certainly defer to the city attorney's office.
Thank you, Councilmember Ross and Mr. Dooling. Staging activity is described, I believe, in the draft as an area where essentially the immigration enforcement agents have come and brought in, their vans. There might be a collection of agents at that particular point. In other words, it's the location from which they are centralizing all of their enforcement activities. That's as distinct from certainly any place that the public has a right to be. An ICE agent also has the right to be. And so we're distinguishing the ability to kind of set up and to take over a space and use it for immigration purposes from the ability to access a space that is already open to the public for an enforcement action.
So, Attorney Laura, can you just in plain language, like layperson language, that means like if I'm an ICE agent and I am planning on making enforcement or executing an enforcement activity like viewing or doing some sort of surveillance or doing some sort of galvanizing of other ICE agents, I would not be able to do that on city-controlled property pursuant to the language in this ordinance. But if I have already done all of that and I'm literally going into a building to make an arrest, is that different from staging?
It's more akin to the difference between being a hiker and being a camper.
Okay.
For a layperson's perspective, if you're going there with the intention of kind of you're using this as your base of operations, and you're even if it's for a short period of time versus a long period of time operations, and you are staging your next activities by gathering the other enforcement agents together in that location, gathering vehicles together in that location, kind of like you would at a campsite, that would be staging. If you're simply observe an individual that you know to be in violation, that you have the authority to take into custody, and that person happens to be in a public space that is open to the public, that happens to be owned by the city, you would not be prevented from doing that under this draft as drafted.
Thank you. And then can we talk just a little bit about the distinguishing factors from of an administrative warrant versus a judicial warrant? What does that look like?
So this is a complicated area of law. A judicial warrant is just what it sounds like in the sense that it is a authorization signed by a judge of competent jurisdiction allowing an individual who is a law enforcement agent or who is an enforcement agent for an administrative body to execute either a search and or an arrest. So you could have a judicial search warrant, you could have a judicial arrest warrant. Those can come from judicial warrants can come from state governmental judges, they can come from federal judges. In the area of immigration enforcement, they come from federal judges. And so they carry, and what makes that distinct from an administrative warrant is that means that it has been reviewed to determine whether or not it meets the standard. A lot of them are probable cause, others are going to be a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, they've reviewed the evidence to determine whether or not there's sufficient evidence to allow for that warrant to issue. Okay, administrative warrants in the immigration space, and there are some experts here in the room. I am not an expert in immigration law, although I'm learning. Administrative warrants in this immigration space can be signed by members of the enforcement agencies themselves. In other words, they could have been reviewed. But more often than not, they are actually signed under the authority of the immigration enforcement officers themselves, which means they don't have a third-party level of review going before a judge to make a determination as to whether or not that is going to be supported by the facts and evidence. So if you're going to enter a space that you want to search a particular person's residence, it has long been the practice of the immigration enforcement agencies to only do that if they have a judicial warrant. That policy has changed. And so what we have now seen is administrative warrants being used to execute searches. It is easy to determine if what you have in front of you is a judicial warrant or an administrative warrant in the sense that you can look for a judge's signature. However, not every activity requires that you physically have on your person a copy of a warrant. And that's what makes this all very challenging.
Thank you.
I think, Councilmember Green, real quick before we go to your question, I think we also discussed this as it pertains to, I think, Director Erickson, you mentioned this when we talk about our city employees. This is going to take also a level of training to ensure that as we're talking about who can come in spaces and what they're asking for, that they do have some sort of level of understanding. Just because this particular piece can be confusing, especially if this is, we don't expect all of our folks to be have the sort of level of background to understand one or the other. So I'm just acknowledging that for members of the public as we talk about these different policies, that it does go a layer deep, because as we're thinking about, if you're working the front desk at a rec center or one of our other facilities, that we're asking you to do and ensuring that folks feel confident in what that looks like and what that policy is moving forward. So it takes us a little bit of time to figure out how to get that out to everyone and ensure their safety as well. So, Councilmember Green.
So common spaces at rec centers would still be considered public spaces under this policy. that are accessible to CPB, is that right?
No, just making sure you're asking me, Councilmember Green.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Laura.
Sorry.
Yes, Laura.
So that's one of the things that needs to be discussed in implementation of the policy. We have defined terms that we're currently trying to refine to describe what is a semi-restricted space versus a restricted space. And places like recreation centers are what make it challenging to define. There are some areas of recreation centers that in order to be in that particular space, you have to have a gym membership, as an example. So you wouldn't be able to freely go into that particular area without being a member of that organization or of that recreational center and, flagging that and providing your identification. There are other areas of recreation centers that are open to the general public without being a member of that center. I'm also thinking of, locations within public parks where there might be enclosed areas within Columbus City parks. There are spaces there that you can rent for like weddings and things along those lines, but other times they're open to the public. And so we have to really be considerate how it's going to be enforced, how people are going to understand what areas are open to the public and are not, and to have a really careful conversation about that, because, to Councilmember Barroso de Padilla's point, some of our buildings, and if anybody who came in here to the meeting tonight, you'll see that it was staffed by security and by the Columbus Division of Police, and they have a full grounding in search and seizure, and they have an understanding of what judicial and administrative warrants are. But other city-owned buildings, like recreation centers, are not staffed by Columbus Division of Police. They're staffed by individuals who have varying degrees of familiarity with the topics that we're talking about, and we certainly don't want to put somebody in a position of, responding to an individual that shows up there dressed in camo and police sign and trying to just make a decision about whether or not they do or don't have a right to be there.
Well, and I was reading through some of the written testimony that we got, and there was one that stood out to me that was from a librarian or a person who works at a library, and talking about every day they go to work just like in fear that that someone is going to walk through the doors and there's going to be some sort of incident on their grounds. So I guess like then the next question is related to the signage that we are going to make available for community partners. Is that on those private properties that are owned? I also think about hospitals where, people are now delivering babies in their living rooms because they're afraid to go receive medical care. Like that can't, is there opportunity for us to enjoin through MOU or some sort of agreement with other organizations in some of these policies? How effective are those signs? And then what happens if a violation of that occurs? Is that something that we're going to pursue litigation related to?
So as it's currently constructed, the draft is currently constructed, it provides a template for any private organization that might choose to decide to enforce that particular policy. It doesn't mandate that. And so I would imagine that the Columbus Metropolitan Library Organization is probably having the very same conversations that we're having here tonight about how and to what extent they are going to draw that line and train their employees. Same with hospitals and those organizations. They have to make and have these hard, difficult conversations and make decisions about the extent to which and how they're going to educate and train people so that we don't have individuals that believe they have a protection that they may not, and also so they can decide how best they want to use their spaces. We in the city can't make that decision on their behalf. That's their private property owners, and they have decisions that they need to make.
Additional questions for this piece?
Okay. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Kirsten Estosi to talk about obstruction and harassment as well as secondary employment prohibition.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for having me tonight. I will be presenting on the two policies that Director Erickson mentioned, starting with increased penalties associated with an obstruction or harassment of a school and or a child daycare center. So starting with the obstruction piece, this also includes physical violence or physical threatening within 15 feet of the premises of a school or daycare center. In contrast to the previous policy that you all have been contemplating, this is more oriented towards a civilian who, for one reason or another, is causing a child, a family, an employee to feel unsafe or to be unable to enter their school or their daycare center. This is something that is really similar to another piece of the city codes regarding reproductive health care facilities. So these types of actions are, in most cases, there's a number of actions that are covered by this policy, but most of them are 4th-degree misdemeanors. But this would modify that to a 1st-degree misdemeanor, again, if the actions were taking place within 15 feet of the premises of a school or a child daycare center. Additionally, this also creates a 1st-degree misdemeanor for any telecommunication or mail or email, other forms of communication that constitutes harassment against the employee of one of those types of facilities, to provide an extra layer of protection for those places that are serving families, serving children, and their employees. Any questions on this piece?
Just one. Have we considered what sentencing looks like? I know we are making it an M1, but obviously our partners in the court would still have discretion from a sentencing perspective on, there are mandatory minimums, mandatory maximums for an M1, but there's a lot of space in between that gives our partners in the court discretion. Have we considered mandatory sentencing built into this legislation for things like this? If not, is that something we could look at and maybe talk about?
Yeah, Councilmember, it's absolutely something that we can look at and talk about. I don't think there's currently any required mandatory minimums.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Council Member. I apologize, I don't have the draft itself right in front of me, and I don't want to speak incorrectly. I know that it contemplates a $1,000 fine and up to a year in jail, but I can't remember if there's a minimum.
Yep, so it would just be that up to 1 year in jail, what I'm thinking about, and if there are any mandatory sentencing kind of guidelines that we could build into the legislation to ensure that someone's not always getting away with the minimum sentencing on issues like this, which are very serious and have dire consequences to our community.
And I want to also just give context for this one in particular. We saw the harassment of especially immigrant-owned daycare centers based upon some rhetoric that was put out in the media. And so because of that, we wanted to be responsive for not just what is happening currently, but in the future, to keep our kids safe and to keep families safe. And so that's where this particular piece comes from, because if folks are wondering, how does this connect with the other pieces? This is where the connection lies. Because what we saw were folks kind of coming in themselves, almost deputizing themselves to look at the conditions of daycare centers. And so that was creating an unsafe environment, especially for our kids, for the daycare center workers, but then certainly for the families that go to those daycares. And so we want to ensure that we're protecting them. That's why we want to increase those penalties to disincentivize that behavior, to let folks know that this should already be obvious, but clearly it was not. And so I wanted to give everyone context for why we were pursuing this in particular. Councilmember, you look like you have a question.
And also just people attempting to enter these centers under false pretenses, claiming to be a parent so that you can gain access to the building and then harass. So you have those two things. They don't all necessarily start with harassment. It begins with deception and for the purpose of harassment.
No, and I appreciate that context as well. I wanted to just ensure folks understood where that was coming from. Do folks have other questions? Yes, Councilmember Green.
I guess I just don't understand, and I think I maybe asked this to Council President Pro Tem, but when I take my son to daycare in the morning, I have to buzz in on a locked door, physically identify myself as his parent using my first and my last name, you're not just permitted to walk into a building and inspect it just because you like to. So I just don't understand.
So a lot of what we heard were home daycare centers that don't have that sort of level of equipment, right? So if you're running a home daycare center where you might have, 10 kids or something smaller, it's usually, they may not all have all of that. I think, language barriers or folks coming in, again, under deceptive purposes, saying they're with the state, saying they're investigating, saying they're the alternative pickup for a child, that sort of thing. Those are the sort of situations that we heard back from folks. And I think that because we have so many home daycare centers that are run by immigrant families for all of the reasons that they would be, I think that's what we're really trying to protect against, because we heard of many cases where this was happening. So that's why this measure was put into place.
And as I understand this, Chair, this is not just the activity that happens once you're knocking on the door to the daycare. This is in and around that daycare. So it would be curtilage, it would be anything within 15 feet. And so if there are harassment activities that are happening that would prevent a parent from even coming onto the property of a daycare, this type of policy would address that as well.
That's correct. Or even some of if they're getting hate mailed, or if they're getting any sort of correspondence asking them for things under again, those false pretenses, that would fall under the harassment.
Thank you very much, council members. The second policy that I'm discussing tonight is a prohibition on secondary employment with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, as well as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. As you've heard tonight, this is actually already broadly contemplated by the Division of Police, by City Code under Chapter 161.10, and this is just furthering those efforts in City Code, affirming those efforts in City Code, and applying it to all city employees. But just to reiterate, it is a prohibition on secondary employment with CBP and with ICE. Employees that are in violation of this would be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of their employment. There is something in the draft that isn't on the slides tonight, but if anyone's looking at the draft in the future, I just don't want it to take them off guard, which is an exception for employees that are acting under official duties. And essentially what that means, as you've heard, the city's not going to enter into a 287G agreement. Existing city code prohibits city resources from being used for immigration enforcement. But what that means is that if a city employee in an official duty, as authorized by their supervisor and however appropriate for that employee, is working with one of these agencies in an anti-terrorism effort that is unrelated to immigration enforcement, that would still be permitted under this. So that is why that's there, but I didn't want it to surprise anyone. Any questions on this piece?
And City Attorney, I just want folks to then understand that we are an employer, like any other employer in the city. And so as an employer, this is a policy that we can put into place for our employees. Can you talk about that?
Thank you, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. The city has a number of policies, and across various departments, they administer in different ways. As Assistant Chief Convey's already referenced at the beginning of this hearing, the Division of Police has a very specific policy about how they handle secondary employment, and that is certainly something that's within the power and authority of an employer to make sure that the individual that is working for them as a city employee doesn't have any potential for conflict of interest or things along those lines. And because the city has the specific policies that Ms. Estos referenced already in the city code, working for Immigration, Customs, and Border Control would likely come into conflicts with some of the very specific policies this council has already passed related to how we interact with immigration enforcement.
Thank you. Additional questions? Director?
Thank you. The last item that we wanted to discuss tonight, you heard Ms. Tremonti similarly make references to the increased use of detention facilities. And in discussions with the city attorney's office and building and zoning, we arrived at a conclusion that probably the most effective way to limit the deployment of detention centers is to effectively bureaucratize the process. So Section 3389 in city code is a section that is traditionally dedicated to special use permits. These are for facilities that are very, very idiosyncratic or that have very specific needs that to a degree sort of require a higher level of review and approval involving the Board of Zoning Adjustments. You see that we have special use permits already established for things like amphitheaters, cemeteries, animal shelters, composting facilities. So very, very simply, this code change would establish a new special use permit for detention facilities that would then have to be reviewed by the Board of Zoning Adjustments. If ICE or federal immigration authorities are operating a detention center without having a permit, theoretically, the Director of Building and Zoning Services would have the authority to issue a vacate order or a stop work order on that particular facility because it's out of compliance with city code and our processes. Questions or comments?
This here specifically says warehouse. There are other types of large buildings that could also be used for the same purposes, a big barn. Are we going to include any building use or just if they go for a warehouse, which is a very specific building type?
I think it's a very fair point, Councilmember. I'm sure we can modify some of the language so that it is more all-encompassing.
Additional questions about this last piece? So I feel like this one is very straightforward. I know that we've had conversations before. We know that ICE is shopping around for facilities like this across the country. And so, again, we want to put measures in that are protecting our folks and that are preventing them from having a detention center like this in our city. So with that, I want to thank our Legislative Research Office. I want to thank our City Attorney's Office for all the work, literally in all of our departments that are here for the past week. All of our energy, past week and a half, all of our energies have really been diverted to looking through all of these policy pieces. I want to ensure that folks also know that all of them may take a little bit more time for us to further refine them. With any piece of policy, we don't want there to be unintended consequences. We want it to be the strongest piece of policy that clearly has an intention and that meets that intention. And so there might be another piece of code or there might be something else that we need to kind of work through. So I just want to put that out as a disclaimer because what you may see on Monday is maybe some of these, not all of these. What you may see in a couple weeks is another batch of these or another one of these. And then there might be some that we're going to put further on the back burner or might change just a little bit because we have to, again, investigate how do we ensure that the intention of what we are getting at is meeting what we have put out there. So I just want to give that little preview. We are now going to move to public testimony. So
Chair.
I'm sorry. Yes.
One last question for LRO
Yes.
before
Yes,
you switch
please.
over.
Yes.
Director Erickson, to your entire team, appreciate the work that you all have put in over the last couple of weeks in getting us here to this point. One policy that I did not see up there and I think is extremely important is really, and one that should fall within the purview of the City of Columbus, is for any vendor, contractor, anyone receiving money from the City of Columbus to certify whether or not they're working with ICE. Can we speak to just the challenges around that, why that's something not being proposed today?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councilmember. That was a policy that we had explored and look at a number of different iterations of it. Ultimately, just the broad sketch is that we would establish either new contract language or something in code that effectively says that if you are entering into any kind of financial agreements with the City of Columbus, then you would be subsequently prohibited from entering into any other financial engagement or any other contractual obligation or engagement with CBP or ICE. Ultimately, we had raised significant concerns about unanticipated negative externalities. There are a tremendous number of potential entanglements between any number of entities that the city contracts with and federal immigration enforcement entities that could have had a sort of almost a crippling deleterious impact on city operations if we had run into something that we weren't fully anticipating. And while, of course, the city wants to leverage its purchasing power and financial ability to affect good policy, we had manifold concerns about the unintended consequences associated with that.
And I appreciate that, and I understand that. No one wants to cripple the city as we continue to make progress in our city. However, the reality is that if there are companies out there that are working with ICE after Americans have been murdered, after children have been put in harm's way, after unconstitutional acts have been witnessed, those companies need to be called out for it. Period. This is not it's just business as usual. This is not something we can just wash over and assume is just going to be okay tomorrow. It's unacceptable. Companies today who are in the city of Columbus, who are choosing to work with ICE after seeing everything, are making a moral choice that does not matter to them.
Thank you, Councilmember. I don't think all is lost. I think that we're continuing to explore what are ways that we can meet exactly what you said. I don't think we were quite ready to present that now. I don't think that means it's off the table. I think it just meets, but I appreciate that and deeply feel that. I don't think anyone here would disagree with you, so.
I would
Yes,
also like
please.
to ask, as we are considering what that looks like, that we can be very specific about what crippling effects means, so that we understand tangibly what compromises and negotiations we might be making as we move forward in this legislation.
No, I appreciate that. Absolutely. Do you want to give just even like a broad example of what that would be, Director?
To a degree, I might even defer back to CPD and the city attorney's office. There were some departments that had raised significant concerns about having to go through. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of contracts that the city enters into on an annual basis, and the investigations associated with those contracts and whether there is compliance or not, and some of the city's suppliers for critical commodities that the city uses on a daily basis, there's a strong likelihood that those entities have financial entanglements with ICE and CBP as well. I don't have specific examples I can cite right now, but happy to provide those at a later date.
Yeah, no, you don't need them today. I knew
Sure.
that. But as we move forward in this conversation, just being prepared to give some specifics, I would ask. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think as we continue to explore other pieces of legislation or, other things will develop. And as we come back, we want to revisit things and have this kind of conversation. And we'll certainly have another public hearing or town halls to talk about things. I also highly encourage folks that if there's a piece of legislation today that you have questions about or wonders about, please reach out to our offices. We're happy to have the conversation, happy to share the information. We have a one-pager that will go out, but happy to continue to have these conversations. I think this is the best way the policy is made, is by having both community input, expert input, and coming together to make the strongest piece of legislation. So thank you both. Any additional comments, questions? Great. Yes.
Just real quick on that point.
Yes.
Because, again, as I said, no one wants to cripple the city in terms of our operations. But the reality is, in this climate where folks are seeing their behavior and deeming it to be unacceptable, just listing these companies out may be enough for them to decide that's not something I want to do anymore. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. We're going to move to public commentary. Okay, we're going to move to public commentary. I don't want to stifle your sentiments here, Councilmember. So the first three speakers are going to be, I will announce you, the first speaker coming on down is Dr. Saleshi from ETSS. Next, we have Karen Motzenter. I got it right, yes, from Jewish Family Services, and then Angie Plummer right after. So if you all want to get yourselves ready, Dr. Saleshi, come on down. The podium is yours. Just a reminder to everyone who is giving testimony tonight, if you will please say your name, any organizations that you represent, and then just a reminder that you do have 3 minutes because we have lots of speakers and I want to make sure that everyone's voices gets heard. So, Dr. Saleshi, welcome back to council, sir.
Good evening. Thank you so much for my voice is stolen by this virus or maybe the allergies, but Council President, Pro Tem Dorans, Councilmember Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, and members of the City Council. My name is Saleshi Ayalo Asfaw, and I'm here representing ETSS to Social Services. Myself and other community leaders are here today because the safety of a city is measured by the safety of its helpless residents. When our neighbors fear that a trip to a public park, a drop of a daycare, or a simple interaction with city service could lead to a family separation, the entire fabric of Columbus is weakened. I stand in solidarity, in strong support of this legislative package. Specifically, I want to highlight 3 critical areas where these changes will protect the dignity and privacy of Columbus citizens. Number 1 is protecting public space and schools by prohibiting ICE from using our parks and parking lots as staging grounds without a judicial warrant. We are reclaiming our public space for this community. Furthermore, the protection for schools and daycare against vigilante harassment are essential. No parent should have a worry about amateur stalkers, film takers their children under the guise of investigation while they are simply trying to access education. Second, accountability and transparency. Requiring council approval for 287G agreement ensures that their cooperation with federal immigration enforcement is public, transparent decision, not one made behind doors, closed doors. Additionally, the creation of an evidence-gathering repository empowers our residents to document their experience and hold authorities responsible. Third one is the zoning and detention. I strongly support the suspension of permitting private detention facilities. Columbus should be a city of welcome, not a city of cages. These are not just administrative code changes, they are declaration of our city's values. By requesting the federal agencies mirror the ID and training standards of the CPD, we are demanding baseline of respect and professional conduct that our residents deserve. We are ensuring the city's employees serve the people of Columbus exclusively without the conflict of interest of outside employment with ICE. I thank Councilmember Dorans and Barroso de Padilla for their leadership on this. I urge the Council to pass this package in its entirety to ensure that Columbus remains a place where every family can live, work, and go to school without the constant shadow of intimidation. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to testify. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Saleshi, and thank you for your continued advocacy and your work to support our communities and families. Yes. Any additional comments? Thank you so much for being here this evening. After Angie Plummer, Elizabeth Brown from YWCA.
Hello, I'm Karen Mosenter, and I'm the CEO of Jewish Family Services. For 118 years now, Jewish Family Services has supported immigrants and refugees who came to Central Ohio seeking refuge from war, persecution, and violence. Our work is driven by the core Jewish value of welcoming the stranger and by the fact that the Jewish people themselves have been immigrants and refugees throughout much of history. Over this past century, Jewish Family Services has assisted both Jewish and non-Jewish immigrants and refugees from all over the world. We work closely with community partners and government entities like the City of Columbus to help these families build safe, stable, and productive lives in Central Ohio. Jewish Family Services supports Council's efforts to address increasing threats to the safety and stability of our foreign-born friends and neighbors. Some may question whether the proposed legislation is necessary. I know many people have expressed the view that if people are here legally, they have nothing to worry about. Or if immigrants haven't committed crimes, they're safe. That view does not fully reflect the complexity of federal law enforcement practices. We are seeing people who are here legally facing detention, prolonged processing, and abrupt changes in status that are creating profound instability. Jewish Family Services is assisting families who have legal status that should enable them to continue going to school and work, running their businesses, and contributing to this community in countless ways. They should be protected from being detained or deported. Nevertheless, we have seen that these families are not safe. So we are helping them prepare for the unthinkable. Parents being separated from their children, family members being detained for days, weeks, or even months in deplorable conditions, individuals being deported to unfamiliar and unsafe locations. We know that City Council can't stop this from happening. The city does not have the power to regulate federal immigration policy or activity. Council can, however, regulate how city resources and property are used, which this legislation is designed to address. The legislation is also designed to promote appropriate transparency and accountability for federal officials. Council's efforts will protect local residents in ways that improve transparency, increase the likelihood that residents' civil rights will be protected, and preserve scarce city resources for the community's benefit and maximize public safety. This is an important and appropriate role for local government. So thank you for your efforts to protect and hold trust for the people of our community.
Good
On
job.
the dot.
And thank you again for all of the work that you do. I think if folks did not realize, the first three speakers represent our resettlement agencies. They do the very important work of once folks are coming here from different places to help them get established, along with many other services that they provide. But I think as we think about the work, these are the folks who are some of the most proximate to the populations that we're talking about. And so I just want to thank you all for the work that you do. I know that especially as we look at federal funding, if we look at people who are in the process, as we're trying to process them through and ensure that they have what they need, we've had many conversations about what that looks like, what employment now looks like because of the big, beautiful bill, what services that they're going to get cut off from. So I just want to acknowledge that folks who we have speaking today are experts who are literally quite proximate to these families and are seeing the challenges every day. So I just want to thank you again for your work and for your advocacy and for being here today. And with that, Angie Plummer from Chris. And after Liz Brown, then it's Dania Hamad from Franklin County Public Defenders Collective.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Dorans and Councilmember Barroso de Padilla and all members of Council. I'm here this evening supportive of Council's efforts to protect our residents from ICE abuses. My name is Angie Plummer, and I am the Executive Director of CRIS, Community, Refugee, and Immigration Services. Our mission is to help refugees and immigrants reach safety and stability, sustain self-sufficiency, and achieve successful integration into the Central Ohio community. To do this, we have numerous services that we offer, including resettling tens of thousands of individuals to Columbus. After our initial resettlement, our work continues to provide housing, English classes, job readiness support, immigration legal services, and health and wellness programming. In my 26 years at CRIS, the past year has been the most difficult for CRIS and for the people that we serve. We faced funding cuts, layoffs, and a deluge of horrific and damaging executive orders coming from the White House. And yet, I am filled with gratitude for how this community has stood by us. We've had a groundswell of engagement from volunteers, faith-based groups, schools, bakeries, breweries, and musicians, and more. There is no doubt in my mind Columbus is a welcoming community, and we, meaning the immigrant community and supporting organizations have felt that support from you. Our elected officials, through your supportive words and now these proposed actions in the form of ordinances, we're here to discuss tonight. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about sensitive locations. Our schools, hospitals, places of worship, and courts. As you know, in January of 2025, the federal government rescinded a longstanding policy that protected these locations from immigration enforcement activity. Federal litigation is ongoing to determine whether that was done legally. Meanwhile, this rescission has led to a climate of fear in our community, particularly with the increase in ICE activity locally, and given the news of how ICE has carried out its activities in other cities. We now have foreign-born residents, regardless of status, who fear going to the doctor, fear going to court, avoid going to houses of worship. Youth are not participating in school activities. It's painful to think of the repercussions that this will have. I want to share some specific examples. First, there's a Somali woman I'll call Hannah who was scheduled for surgery in December. Her mother called me and asked if she should cancel that surgery because it was during Operation Buckeye, and she was afraid to have her daughter sitting at the hospital. Second example involves clients in our Crime Victims Assistance Program, many who are now afraid to go to municipal court because of increased ICE presence at the courthouse. Every day, Columbus residents are choosing not to attend court because they fear immigration enforcement. This includes witnesses and victims. The fear extends to green card holders, even naturalized U.S. citizens who have questions about whether they are safe from ICE harassment. And I see page 2. I am out of time, but so much to say. Thank you for your support, and we welcome offering any expertise we have while these ordinances are discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. I also want to say, I know that we've had lots of conversations about the municipal court. I want folks to know that we cannot, the municipal court is they follow a different set of rules. We cannot force them to do anything. We have had conversations with the municipal court. You and I have talked about this. We've had conversations with the municipal court. I would also just implore folks that if not, but for the people, change happens. And so the continued advocacy of people sometimes means even more than the conversations we have. And so I would just encourage folks that as you're seeing the entities that we don't have control over, your voices matter. Your voices matter. And so our voices joined with yours. Just know that we stand in solidarity. We have had conversations with the municipal court. I think they are grappling with what it is that they want to do and how they want to move forward. But I can't implore folks more to share your stories, share your advocacy, write those letters, create posts, et cetera, because that does make a difference and it does move the needle. So thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate all efforts to make sure that ICE is held accountable for their activities, including this idea of a repository of information. I mean, we know now more than ever how important video evidence is to make sure people are held accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Councilmember Green.
I do have a question for, it's actually for CPD probably, or maybe the city attorney, related to your testimony. And that is in relation to, so I do know that it is becoming common that individuals will be afraid to show up for their normal court cases at the court, as I would be as well. Then the result of that is that the judges are sort of put in a position where they have to issue a bench warrant. You mentioned that the only time that we would be assisting law enforcement is in related to warrants. I'm imagining that's warrants for like a violent crime of some sort. But like in a situation like that, is that a point where CPD is intervening, or?
Yeah, we have a duty, a legal duty to, act on any legitimate warrant that we can verify.
And in cases where you have said that we are enforcing those warrants, are those actions typically initiated by CPD as a result of the court reaching out to us, or is this a situation where Border Patrol and Customs Enforcement is reaching out to us proactively, watching these warrants, and then what does that collaboration look like, I guess?
Yeah, so Customs and Border Patrol and ICE does not reach out to us for warrant enforcement. They can obviously pick and choose which warrants they want to enforce. Generally, it's us coming into contact in either a traffic stop or a criminal. We're responding to a call for service, and we run somebody's information, and it pops up that they have a warrant. The court doesn't reach out to us either when somebody has issued a bench warrant. We generally, sometimes these go unnoticed for 10, 20 years or longer because there's no notification to CPD. So generally, it's just we come across that individual and have a reason to run their information because they are a suspect in domestic violence, for instance, and we're going to run them and say, oh, you have a bench warrant for an unpaid traffic ticket from 5 years ago. And then we have a duty to make an arrest on that.
Okay. So
And just as a point of clarification, and I got 3 lawyers up here. Okay, so, city attorney, if we want to solve that problem, it's not on CPD, it would then go back to the court. Is that a judgment call for judges that issuing that warrant? What does that process look like? Just because I'm thinking people probably have that question.
So judicial officers do have some discretion in determining how to address a failure to appear of an individual who's been summoned to court. Oftentimes in a criminal case, a warrant will be issued for an individual's arrest for failure to appear in court, mainly because the case cannot move forward when that individual fails to appear. There might be a victim who's been harmed by that particular offense, and oftentimes the prosecution in those circumstances will be advocating for that warrant to issue because we also don't always know why an individual's not there. We just know that we cannot pursue the case. The court will then take that into consideration and make a determination as to whether or not they're able to issue a summons to get that individual to come into court, to continue the case, maybe at the request of their defense attorney if they have knowledge about why that individual has failed to appear, or to issue a warrant for that individual's arrest. Once that warrant is issued, Assistant Chief Conveys is absolutely correct. If a law enforcement officer comes into contact with an individual, what that warrant literally does is advise any law enforcement officer that they are to take that individual into custody if they are within the jurisdiction of the court, which CPD would be. So that officer at that point would need to detain that individual. After that, there's the possibility of posting of bond and things along those lines. But ultimately, yes, there is some initial discretion with the court. They're the ones that are issuing the warrant.
And I know that our Public Defenders Collective is going to come up and they can probably answer this. We had a conversation with the Public Defender's Office as well. There's a number of things. I think this is the next generation of know your rights for folks to also understand that they can preemptively call so they don't have to appear in court, that they can say, depending upon what the issue is, that they can call and say, these are my circumstances, I can appear in court, and then they can work with the Public Defender's Office to then find different options. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm just showing what I know. Okay, thank you. Does that answer questions?
Yeah, I just a point of notation here too. There may not necessarily be a situation where police are proactively picking people up, but there are systems that work interchangeably with the court system, particularly the housing system. If you have a warrant block, it is literally impossible for you to receive housing resources sometimes. They will do a warrant check. Oftentimes, our office had discretion to be able to advocate for people who were unhoused trying to get housing. So again, I think it is very important for our public defenders to provide that information because I know that it is inappropriate for the city attorney's office to advise our citizens. However, I do think that as we talk about what these barriers, what a bench warrant, what type of barrier that can be, we talk about it comprehensively and try to make sure that folks have all of the information that they need to be able to work through this time.
Perfect. Liz Brown, welcome back to council. So after Danya, it is Sudarshan.
Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to testify here tonight. My name is Elizabeth Brown. I am the president and CEO of YWCA Columbus. And we are in strong support of the ordinance package under consideration because it aligns directly with our mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. As a provider of social services in Columbus and Franklin County, we know firsthand the importance of a diverse community where everyone has access to opportunity and belonging, full stop. Across our homelessness, housing, education, and leadership programs,
We see every day the extraordinary contributions immigrants make to our city. We also see the fear and instability that harmful enforcement tactics create. We proudly stand in solidarity with our immigrant clients and neighbors, which is why we are here tonight. But first, it is critical to acknowledge that the tactics of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, are not new or isolated. Since its creation as a federal agency responsible for immigration enforcement, ICE has generated profound harm. Indiscriminate workplace raids, the separation of parents from children, prolonged detention, and uneven application of our laws have raised chronic, persistent equity and due process concerns. These practices have devastated families, destabilized neighborhoods, inflicted lasting trauma, and led to the loss of life for decades. I want to be clear about that. And for much of that time, a lot of the reason, some of the pipeline to ICE had to do with local law enforcement. I would encourage members of this council to stay very close to the law enforcement body that is under your jurisdiction in terms of how they do traffic stops, whether or not they do ICE holds, maybe advocate with the county sheriff about the same, and how they are defining low-level criminal violations that would cause them to report an immigrant to ICE. Please keep that conversation ongoing and not just starting here tonight. So now we are in this burning national debate about the need to change, and that debate matters to YWCA Columbus because eliminating racism and advancing justice requires us to respond when systems disproportionately harm immigrant communities and communities of color. The ordinance package you have crafted before you takes thoughtful, community-centered steps to affirm safety, dignity, and trust. It makes clear that spaces in Columbus are places of belonging, not staging grounds for fear. It protects children so that schools and daycares remain environments of learning and not suffering. Taken together, these measures embody YWCA's conviction that justice is indivisible and that every person, regardless of background, deserves to live with dignity, hope, and security. 10 more seconds. I want to add that history will judge how we responded in this moment. I believe deeply that the courage of impacted communities, the voices raised in our streets, and policies like the ones you are considering will reflect the best of who we are as a city and as a people, and ultimately will be the forces that write history. Thank you very much.
So I thank you for never wavering from the mission of the YWCA. It's critical and it's important. And thank you for always speaking truth to power. I also want to just acknowledge that the Franklin County Sheriff is, we did invite them here tonight. They are not here. So I would say, although we had a conversation with them, this is where advocacy would again come into play from our community, both with our Franklin County commissioners, but certainly they are directed by the state. And so if folks have not been paying attention to the harmful policies coming out of the State House, this is part of the challenge. We can have a conversation with CPD. We can have a conversation with the sheriff's office. We can direct them to do things. We cannot force them to, or ask them to. It is just as good as, again, the voice of the people. So I would just put that out there because I think there are probably some practices that we would want them to brush up on. So I appreciate your point and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, council members.
Danya, and then Sudarshan, you're after Danya, and then Riverview.
Good evening, council members. My name is Danya Hammond, and I come before you as a representative of the Franklin County Public Defender Collective, Local 6363, to strongly urge you to pass legislation to limit illegal and unconstitutional actions by ICE in our community. Our union is comprised of nearly 100 attorneys who practice law daily in the Franklin County Municipal Court, as well as Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, in the Adult Criminal Division, and the Domestic Relations and Juvenile Branch. I know you said earlier that there's not much that you can maybe do in regards to the municipal court, but I do think it's important to explain to you guys what's happening there on the daily. Many of us have seen firsthand how ICE's presence in the courthouse causes unnecessary trauma and fear amongst our community, and we strongly urge you to pass a resolution that addresses the safety of all our community members who live and work in the city of Columbus. Last June, most of Columbus watched local news videos and social media posts showcasing the ICE agents' arrest and detention of Leonardo Fausto as he left the Franklin County Municipal Courtroom. Or perhaps residents first became aware of ICE's presence in the municipal courthouse 2 weeks ago. But we are here to tell you that this is a regular occurrence. Since this time last year, ICE agents have maintained a visible presence in the courthouse, often lurking near the exits of the building or blocking exits on the upper level floors where the courtrooms are located. They are almost always in plain clothes, and in many instances, the individual is taken before their attorney has been informed and before the case has been heard. It is important to note that most, if not all, of these arrests have been civil enforcement actions. For those of you who may not know, that is when ICE kidnaps individuals on the basis of a civil warrant, not a judicially signed warrant. The FCPD Collective acknowledges that allowing ICE to maintain a prominent and intimidating presence within city limits and thus the courthouse constitutes a significant interference with due process rights and equal access to the justice system. Defendants' due process rights are infringed when they don't have fair and equal access to the courthouse due to their fear of being kidnapped by ICE agents, especially when their case is often left unresolved due to their detention, which will also lead to a warrant being issued for failure to appear. They are never given the chance to fight their case or have their day in court, and their presumption of innocence is stripped away. Victims never get the opportunity to see the case resolved, and some non-U.S. citizen victims and witnesses are also scared to come to court due to ICE's presence. It's clear that ICE civil enforcement actions in the courthouse have a direct negative impact on the protection of constitutional due process rights, and we are not alone in this belief. The Franklin County Court of Common Pleas adopted its own local rules restricting civil immigration enforcement actions within the courthouse, and we agree with the judicial branch of Common Pleas and applaud its bravery in standing up for the rights of the public. And to the members of the public who are listening, we want you to know that we are fighting and advocating for your rights every single day, regardless of your immigration status. Too often, you've only seen one narrative, and we want you, the public, to know that we are defending you. We're defending your due process rights that are afforded to all persons by the U.S. Constitution and to ensure that everyone has equal access to the justice system. And to the members of the council tonight, we have seen firsthand how ICE enters our municipal courthouse and kidnaps individuals without notice and access to counsel, disrupting access to justice for victims and defendants alike, and disturbs due process and just finality of criminal cases. If this is what has been happening inside the courthouse, imagine what will continue to happen in the community outside the eyes and ears of where the justice system is located. We ask that you adopt proposed resolutions that will create a safer and more just environment for all people within Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to be clear when we say we don't have that direct jurisdiction over the courthouse, but I appreciate the advocacy for a resolution, and I think that's something that we can certainly consider in the future. Do my colleagues have any comments?
Yeah. I just have one question for you. Has there been anything put in place or communication that has been given to you by the court on how to report observations of ICE in the courthouse? What I don't want there to be is a strong disconnect between how many observations of ICE have been seen in the court by the court versus by the community, and I want to make sure that there is consistent communication back and forth between the court and the folks who are seeing this activity.
Oftentimes, we are not made aware of ICE's presence until our clients are actively being taken by ICE outside of the courtrooms.
Okay.
And I do just want to add in clarification to something that was mentioned earlier. Our clients who are actively in ICE custody, the city prosecutor's office does ask for warrants for their failure to appear despite knowing exactly where they are and that they're actively in ICE custody. That's been something we've been addressing in the courtrooms, but I did want to clarify that.
No, I appreciate that. And I think one thing we've also been trying to do is in these conversations is to also educate ourselves, because there's things that we will hear, and then there's things that will sometimes stories that are published or things that are out there. And so we've tried to ask, like, what are the processes? So we should continue to have this conversation, because I think in the places where we can apply pressure, we will always do that. In the places where we can have conversations, or if there's alternatives to the things that we can do if we can't put in policy or legislation, we will do that. So thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have a question for the city attorney really fast related to that, because I have heard the same thing as well. You know, I was speaking with someone at the court who, you know, where I was like, is there an option not to issue these warrants? can we just extend the case out, give an extension? And the information that I received was that they were instructed by the city attorney's office to issue warrants in those cases. And I just wonder if you can clarify, or if that was a previous policy, what level of offenses would that have applied to? And if it was maybe a previous policy, is it something you're reconsidering? And I would make the same plea to you. Is there an option in those cases to extend those cases rather than issuing a warrant?
Thank you, Councilmember Green. So I previously served under City Attorney Pfeiffer as the chief prosecutor in the Franklin County Municipal Court at that particular point in time, so I can talk to my specific past experiences. Obviously, in my current role, I don't serve in that particular capacity. However, at that point in time, we had a number of difficult situations that would come before us when you had an individual who was alleged to be in ICE custody, or who we knew to be in ICE custody. And in terms of whether or not it's alleged or known to be, that is not often clear at that particular moment in time. We will often be advised that the individual is believed to have been taken, but we would need to know whether or not, in fact, they definitively were, as just one point to put on it. But there are certainly specific instances where there are reasons why a prosecutor would ask that a warrant be issued for that particular individual's arrest. An example would be when they're alleged to have committed an act of domestic violence. We have a victim that's before us. That victim desires to see that individual brought to justice. If we issue a warrant for their arrest, if they do come into contact with the Division of Police, that individual will need to be brought to the court. We might have concerns for the victim's safety. We might have concerns for the public's safety. There are some individuals who have multiple violations of driving under the influence of alcohol. Certainly not every immigrant is in that particular situation. Not every individual who has issues with immigrations and customs is in that particular situation, but there are individuals who are. And the city prosecutor has to weigh those particular incidences and circumstances and make decisions that are in the best interest of the public at large and not of one particular individual. In terms of the question of whether or not it could be extended. So the city prosecutor doesn't have the authority one way or the other to quote unquote extend a case. There are speedy trial requirements on every given criminal case. If the defense is able to waive those speedy trial requirements, then a conversation can be had. But if those speedy trial requirements are continuing, then this prosecutor cannot simply extend the speedy trial time. Ultimately, the decision about whether or not to grant any kind of a continuance is the court's decision. The prosecutor will make arguments based upon the specific facts and circumstances before them of that particular case. I can't speak to whether or not there's a specific policy at this particular moment, only because I'm not currently in the prosecutor division, but it's certainly something I can take back to the city attorney.
Well, and I think I would advocate now that, certainly violent offenders. I will say that my entrance into this discussion came when there was a misinterpreted domestic dispute. A mom that had has 2 children as young as my son was ended up being arrested and detained and shipped off to Butler County before a lawyer could be contacted. And it ended up being a huge misunderstanding. An interpreter wasn't provided. Everything escalated very quickly. And I don't even know if she could still be here, there to this day. So when we're talking about, blanket guidance or blanket requests for certain types of offenses, I at a minimum would argue that there must be some sort of review process by, on a case-by-case basis through the city attorney's office, so that we don't have situations, where we have everyone walks into their jobs with their own set of biases and worldviews that influences the decisions and the actions that they take, right? So when we're talking about people-powered jobs like law enforcement, or we're talking about people in the community who observe something and are placing a call for a situation that they might not understand, I just think we need to be very intentional in this moment, because you've got a whole group of people who just automatically assume that anyone who is not born on this, on United States of America land is a rapist or a criminal of some sort. And so if we are going to uphold our values, then I think we need to be intentional about doing our due diligence when we're issuing guidance like that, or we're making requests like that, where we are reviewing cases where we have, where it's not just a blanket sort of general recommendation for a warrant based on a certain type of charge.
Can I just briefly add something?
Yes, one thing I do want to mention, and I want to just honor the fact that we have some of our Muslim brothers and sisters who are here and are observing Ramadan. And if I could ask the privilege of our next two speakers, if we could bump some people up just so that we can get them out of here, if that would be okay with you. But yes.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, as someone who is actively working in the courthouse every single day and does have a hand on some of these cases, we do actively provide the city attorney's office with verification that our clients were taken directly from the jail's custody to ICE's custody. That is always a given when we are discussing these specific issues. And just as a brief reminder to everyone who's listening, non-citizens are also afforded the presumption of innocence as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sudarshan, are you okay if we have a speaker go before you? Thank you so much. First of all, I want to acknowledge, I think there are many of our partners that we need to have continued conversations with about how they change policies and why, and ask these questions. And I think that this hearing tonight is an example of that, of us continuing to have those conversations and continuing to understand, going back to where is the breakdown? Where is the challenge? Where are the policy changes that we need to ensure? Because, we know that when you are in the Franklin County Jail, they're preemptively calling ICE, right? That is a policy change that we would like them to make. So these are the kinds of questions and kinds of conversations we need to continue to have. I think folks are seeing us have this in the public, but these are the conversations that we have been having with all of our partners about that continued change. So I'm glad that we were able to have that here so folks could start to see that and could start to then ask questions for themselves and understand how the process works, so that as you're advocating, you know where are the right places to apply that pressure and where are the right places for that advocacy. So we are going to next go to Anissa Laban. And then after Anissa, Dorothy Hassan. And then Khalid, is Khalid here? Tarani? I don't think I see him. Okay.
Ramadan Mubarak, and thank you very much. And I sincerely want to thank Amelia and the gentleman who were called for your patience and understanding. Thank you. Good evening, Council President, Pro Tem Rob Dorans, Councilmember Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, and honorable members of Columbus City Council. It is great to be back. My name is Anissa Liban, and today I am here as a proud member of our Helpers Board of Directors. I'll allow my amazing colleague Dorothy expand more on what we would like you to know about this important work that we're doing, but I wanted to start off by saying I absolutely am supportive of this legislative package. I think it's about time that something is done that's tangible. With that being said, I want to thank you for proposing legislation that aims to better support and protect immigrant neighbors here in Columbus. I really just want to share a story. A few weeks before our Thanksgiving pop-up event last year, ICE rammed the vehicle a family was traveling in with 2 children inside. Officers first forcibly removed the children's mother and detained her, taking her to Butler County Jail. Her partner, whom we will call Joshua, was left alone with 2 minor children despite not having legal custody. In the days and weeks that followed, Joshua was paralyzed by fear. He stopped going to work, the usual, was too afraid to send the children back to school, and feared leaving his apartment. Neighbors harassed him, and he really felt pushed away, unsafe and underserved in Columbus, unsure where to turn to or who he could ask for help to let the children and himself survive. Thankfully, he turned to our helpers. When he arrived at our helpers community free store at Elevate Northland, he was, of course, frantic and emotionally exhausted. The 10-year-old boy served as the family's interpreter, translating for Joshua and his 16-year-old sister, who is deaf and communicates in sign language. In the midst of the fear and instability, a child carried the weight of an adult conversation and legal uncertainty. Despite everything, both children showed remarkable resilience. Joshua showed us videos and photos of a successful construction business that he had built and really liquidated all that he had earned, believing that he was investing in safety and opportunity. I'll kind of skip over here, but I want you all to know that he showed us the last $100 in his wallet. And we were able to provide him immediate food, toys, and household supplies that day and connect Joshua with ABLE, Advocates for Basic Legal Equity, for a legal referral for the detained mother. And these supports filled the critical gaps that family was facing in that crisis. But as weeks passed, the family fell behind on rent, left their apartment to avoid eviction, and relocated to Oklahoma with acquaintances for survival. Why am I sharing all of this? I believe that this story highlights the gaps in our community. Legal representation is critical, and we're really deeply grateful for our legal partners who fight this work in court. But we really believe that our helpers, we are filling a gap that many of our amazing partners and legal partners aren't able to fill. And so we provided that necessary emergency response to help this family during crisis. But we recognize that this support that we're doing through CORN, through our helpers, it's not enough. And so what we want to do is ask this body humbly pass the legislation, but make sure that you're also investing in the nonprofits that are filling that emergency response, because we can talk policy all day, but if we're not meeting the basic needs of these immigrant families, not much is going to be done to help them thrive. Thank you.
Anissa, before you leave, I know that there are several legal organizations that are doing legal work, but they're also restricted by whatever the requirements are with regard to grant dollars and what they can and what they can't do. What I understand is there is a gap in kind of private attorneys that would be able to literally fill in the gap, start to finish, get to folks before maybe they're detained, or be a number to call before they're getting detained, or while they are going through that process. Is this the kind of work that our helpers is doing?
We are absolutely making those referrals in those connections, but even in those instances, I'll say that we're blessed to have a lot of nonprofits that have those attorneys, and we have access to a few private attorneys. We're working with them to ensure that we're supporting the right families and prioritizing those needs, but I'll also allow Dorothy to kind of expand and address that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. Thank you for your continued advocacy. Thank you for welcome back home. Thank you for being here. So after Dorothy Sudarshan, you're up. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Good evening, esteemed honorable council members, and it's full circle to be back here, because the last time I was here in support of the commission that has presented this legislative package. So thank you for allowing us back. My name is Dorothy Hassan, and I have the privilege and responsibility of serving as CEO of Our Helpers. And let me begin to read off of this wonderful script here and decide when I will stop. Months before the December 2025 surge, which was called Operation Buckeye by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Our Helpers was building infrastructure to support immigrant families across Columbus. Our early stance on the rights of our neighbors has never wavered, even though our staff and funding has been left to bear the consequences. In November of 2024, we launched Central Ohio Rapid Response Network, which we affectionately call CORN, a coalition of interfaith clergy members, educators, attorneys, elected officials, and grassroots organizations. Since January of 2025, CORN has hosted 57 coordination meetings to share national and regional immigration updates, verify information, and mobilize coordinated community response. We've talked about the fear that was in the hearts of many families. And through this infrastructure and network that we built, we were able to ask our network members, including immigration lawyers, what their advice was to families when Operation Buckeye started. And they told us that their advice was for families to stay home. We were at a meeting with Councilwoman Lourdes, who said the best advice right now is to stay home. And we knew that we were in a position to keep families fed when they were staying home. With that, over winter break, we were able to use the manpower of more than 100 of 344 registered volunteers, and we were able to deliver 685 boxes of dry food, produce, and household supplies to the doors of the most targeted families in the region across 32 zip codes. Nearly 332 families received grocery deliveries with essential supplies and reassurance during one of the most destabilizing times our immigrant community has experienced in Columbus. We were thankful for the helping hands of President Hardin, who came and packed boxes with us, along with Councilwoman Lourdes, who also, along with packing boxes, was able to steer a huge donation to the effort. Volunteers mobilized and protected people's right to worship also in safety by patrolling and providing safety and targeted mosques and churches. We led community-wide training, equipping people with the knowledge that they needed to protect their rights and those of the targeted friends, students, and neighbors. To answer your question, Councilwoman Ross, while there are organizations that have been able to direct individuals to legal representation, our helpers has been able to fill in the gap with everything else that happens when a family is in fear of their real existence. So we've been able to provide food, legal referrals. We got a call last week from a family in Athens who was supporting a family here in Columbus and said that that man had bought that family a washer and dryer a year ago. That dryer now needed repair, and he needed a referral because he no longer thought it was a smart decision to just let anybody in that family's house, and he needed an organization who got it.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan.
And I just also, we got lots of our helper stands in the audience today. I also want to
Up here too, I'm a stand.
I'm
an our helper stand.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was going to say, I think one of the things I also appreciated about our helpers is that we had, during that time, we had lots of organizations, especially smaller grassroots organizations that were doing home deliveries, and we were able to connect them to our helpers because while they were struggling to get food and other things, we were able to get them. When we had conversations about now we have Latinos on the list and we're not giving them the food that they want, we were able to reach out to a grocery store that then offered donations. So I think that I so deeply believe in the infrastructure that you have built and the ways that we can come together as a community, and I think this is the best example of that, and ensuring that we're meeting people where they are. So if it's not safe for you to leave, bellies are still getting fed, that we have our other organizations that are making sure that you have a roof over your head, that bills are getting paid, and so this is what community really looks like, and this is the everyday work that these organizations have been doing, and that with our helpers, I mean, I was there when we were turning drivers away because we had enough drivers, right? And so I think that just shows the generosity and the spirit of who Columbus really is. No matter what the haters say, no matter what the naysayers say, you all have shown who we really are. So thank you.
Thank you for the support.
Sudarshan, thank you so much for your patience. Representing the Bhutanese community of Central Ohio, then Amelia from Riverview, and then Josue Vicente and Sarah DeMio from Ohio Hispanic Coalition. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Dear Council President Shannon Hardin, members of this chamber, and Councilwoman Barroso de Padilla. Good evening. My name is Sudarshan Pekkaril. I'm the Executive Director of Bhutanese Community of Central Ohio. Thank you for this opportunity to share my testimony today as a representative of Central Ohio's immigrant and refugee communities. I am myself a former refugee and resettled in the United States. And it's an honor to be here, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla, that I am testifying in favor of the proposed changes regarding the federal civil immigration enforcement. First of all, I believe this is a task of utmost importance that the city needs to address. I am so glad Councilmember Barroso de Padilla has taken this initiative, as he has championed many such efforts to address matters concerning immigrants and refugees prior as well. And as you know, I've been running a nonprofit organization for the last 10 years that directly works with immigrants and refugees every day. This community, which is the backbone of our local economy, has helped sustain and grow Central Ohio's economy over last decades with dedications, work commitment, and resilience to raise families in a safe place. But we are all aware of the recent ICE activities. I wanted to give you an example that 49 members of my community have been deported to Bhutan, and a country that does not recognize us. We actually don't have a country to go back. And within 24 hours, Bhutan has deported them out of the country. So that's the condition. And even today, many more members of the Bhutanese are being deported to Bhutan that does not recognize them. And so it's very important that at this time, at the city level, we need to ensure that people have the legal representations, people have someone to speak on their behalf, and they are protected. They are not further persecuted when they are thrown into a country that does not recognize them. And so also I wanted to add this, the members of this great chamber are all aware of the populations that sustain the local economy. You are also aware of the cultural vibrancy this community adds. You are also aware of the fact that the vast majority of these community members are tax-paying and law-abiding. However, when it comes to safety, support, and protections, they are often at the bottom of the list in terms of priority. We have lived through decades of postponed services and delayed access to services that the general public benefits from. And no one has made an issue, but honorable members, because we are the community that are humble and grateful for the opportunity to work and raise a family. However, things have changed. I know I have 10 more seconds. However, things have changed recently because we are a resettled refugee population that has been evicted just 35 years ago. And what we are seeing now, right now in the streets of the United States is what I have experienced as a 10-year-old back in Bhutan. And so I see the same pattern repeating, initially targeting so-called criminals and then going into the community and targeting everybody else. Based on who we were at the time, we were minorities living in Bhutan, we were Hindus in a majority Buddhist country. And I see the pattern repeating here, and it scares us. And so I wanted to urge the council to really take meaningful actions and support as best as possible, because we don't want to relive the history that we just lived. With that, I'm out of my time, but really I wanted to thank Councilwoman Barroso de Padilla for your leadership and for standing up for the rights of immigrants and refugees in Central Ohio. I'd also like to thank the honorable members of this chamber for your effort in supporting these legislations. And last but not least, I also wanted to thank Jessica, Amarisa, and Andrea for your work and commitment that you put together and always been a support. Also, I wanted to thank my staff, Baksa and Mani, who are standing here, because it's an everyday challenge for us even to come to work. And when we see someone unsuspected or unsuspected person in our door, sometimes we have to lock our door to determine if we are safe to go outside or not ourselves. So this is a critical movement. We urge you, we request you, please stand up, please speak for us. Thank you.
Sudarshan, thank you so much. I think as we've seen the Bhutanese community grow and understanding the needs of the community, I think people come here because they see their people here and because people invite them and they say, we have a community here and you are always welcome here, right? And we want to ensure that folks feel that safety. And I think this is the challenge, is that when we don't acknowledge where folks are coming from, we don't acknowledge that sometimes there is no place to go back to, or that you have no citizenship citizenship. You have no land that is going to recognize you, that we are essentially throwing people out on the street, and that is not what America was built on. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for your advocacy, and thank you for continuing to teach us and be the voice of our people. Thank you. So Amelia, then Josue, and Sarah from Ohio Hispanic Coalition, Mark from HacoNet. I'm just using first names because we're all friends here.
Thank you so much. My name is Emilia Sheely. I'm here as the Executive Director of Riverview International Center and also here in support of the proposed legislation. The RIC, as we call ourselves, is a community-based organization where immigrants are welcomed, empowered to build their lives in Columbus. We do this through programs designed to meet their evolving needs like job placement, education for all ages, and connection to resources, and most importantly, to relationships. In 2025, we served more than 2,000 individuals from 60 countries. Among them were people of varying statuses and families of mixed status. Among them were more than 50 families from Haiti with temporary protected status, many families with active asylum cases, and families who came through the diversity visa program who are now desperate to get their green card in hand in case they're stopped by ICE. The RIC's response to this terror unleashed on our community is to continue to be a welcoming and empowering place for immigrants. And that sounds kind of simple, kind of basic, but we refuse to not offer our empathy, our support, and our reassurance. We are providing resources, food, diapers, and material support. We continue to help hundreds of Columbus residents navigate employment in Central Ohio. We can only do this because residents of the city have stepped up, both as volunteers and as donors. Thanks to them, we've retained every staff member on our team and grown our programming through a very challenging time. It thrills me that the City of Columbus, through this ordinance, aims to stand together and draw a line. Should ICE ever approach schools, my kids say no as CCS students, and I as a parent and an executive director say, I hope that we can pass what's been proposed here. I welcome any legislation that restricts immigration enforcement to the lawful, but also the humane. I also welcome any collaboration or investment from the City Council, from the City of Columbus, in the RIC's work to support and protect more than 2,000 of our city's residents. So thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and I'm giving you back 48 seconds.
First of all, thank you for your kindness of letting folks go before you. Thank you for thank you for your partnership and for the folks that you serve. I mean, I think that, the RIC is one of those testaments of how the community supports community. And you've shown that time and time again. And we do want to make an investment in your work, and we should talk about what that looks like. But thank you for always answering my call when we are reaching out and serving residents, and for all the work that you do at the RIC. So thank you
so much.
Absolutely. So Ohio Hispanic Coalition, HacoNet, and then Jonah Hilario. Perfect.
Good evening. Councilmember Barroso de Padilla, members of council. My name is Sarah DeMeo. I'm speaking on behalf of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, Ohio's only Latino-led statewide multi-service nonprofit with 36 years of service to our Latino immigrant families across Central Ohio. I want to be very clear today. This is not a theoretical debate. The policies before you today are about whether Latino families in Columbus are safe right now. Today, tomorrow, and next week. The families we serve are already changing their behavior out of fear. Parents are keeping children home. Families are avoiding parks, schools, and city buildings. Victims are not reporting domestic violence. And students are afraid to go to school not knowing if their dad will be home when they return. Statistically, we saw our very identity, being Latino, is being persecuted. The proposed city codes changes are necessary and they're overdue. First, Columbus must prohibit ICE from using the public spaces as staging grounds for civil immigration enforcement without city approval or a judicial warrant. When ICE uses parks, parking lots, or city-controlled property this way, those spaces immediately are unsafe. Public trust is broken, and the city becomes complicit in harm it did not authorize and cannot control. Second, the council must act to protect schools and child care centers from those vigilante harassments or so-called journalism. No child should be watched, filmed, or targeted because of their parents' assumed immigration status. No parent should fear picking up their child. Misdemeanor penalties for trespass or intimidation are not extreme. They're minimum necessarily to protect our children. We also do demand the strong safeguards that require city council approval for any 287G agreements that prohibit city employees, and we like vendors as well, from holding outside employment or contracts with ICE, and advance a resolution that is supported and brought forward by the Commission of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, requiring ICE to meet the same identification and training standards expected of CPD when operating in Columbus, and we do ask that members of Congress support similar legislation. Finally, Columbus must draw a firm line against immigration detention facilities within city limits, except for publicly owned facilities that subject full public oversight. Detention centers do harm families, destabilize neighborhoods, and contradict the city's stated values. When Latino and immigrant residents are unsafe, Columbus is unsafe. Public safety does not exist without trust. Economic stability does not exist without participation. And democracy does not exist when the entire community lives in fear. Council, this is your responsibility. We urge you to act decisively, without delay, and to pass these measures in full. Our community is watching, our families are waiting, and the time to act is now. Thank you.
Gracias, mi gente. I also want to ensure that we acknowledge one of our commissioners from the Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. Thank you for being here. I mean, it is without a doubt, unfortunately, immigration enforcement and Latinos have a long history, and we are disproportionately targeted, probably because they creeped up on what was once Mexico and never have gotten over it, but I digress. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for the way that you show up for communities. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Council Member. Council.
While HacoNet is making their way up, Councilmember Green, I do want to ensure that we circle back to our city attorney's office because we did get a point of clarification on our last conversation, but we had to move forward because of folks who were in the audience. So, city attorney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Barroso de Padilla. I was able to connect with City Attorney Klein about the question that was asked about whether or not the City Prosecutor's Office has a blanket policy. We do not. So the policy within the City Attorney's Office Prosecutor Division is they make a decision based upon the specific case that's before them. So traffic cases, low-level offenses, those cases get dismissed for individuals that we have verified are in ICE custody. Offenses of violence and drunk driving cases, similar to the policy that was in place when I was there previously, are cases where warrants are asked for failure to appear so that we can pursue those prosecutions in order to protect public safety.
I know, I think that's what I'm asking though, is, you know, you just listed specific blanket offenses, you know, certain types of offenses, not all offenses. But what I'm asking is if there's an allegation of a crime, are we reviewing the case in detail, making sure that like, hey, this is something that 100% we believe that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt is absolutely the case, and we're planning on taking this to trial if need be, and request a warrant? Or are we just saying if you have committed an act of domestic violence or blah, 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 you know, whatever it is, we're asking for the warrant to be issued?
So just to be clear, a prosecutor has rules of professional conduct that must be followed, that they're only going to pursue cases that they believe that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, of course, those things can happen. Witnesses can fail to appear, evidence can go stale, things cannot proceed the way that we like, but it would be unethical for us to pursue it unless we felt we had probable cause to believe a crime had been committed.
I think what I am trying to get at, and again, I only have one specific example that I'm citing, and you guys deal with thousands of cases a day, so I recognize that we're working with a small sample. But I can definitively tell you that I believe it to be the perspective of the court that it's like anytime someone walks through the door that has a domestic violence charge, we're supposed to issue a warrant for them, and that it has been sort of blanket requested, so I'm not saying that like if you were, like I recognize that. I think that our two systems are not talking to one another maybe, or, I just think that these things should be on a case-by-case basis. There needs to be some sort of review. I recognize that if you're actively working a case, but at the time that a warrant is issued, you haven't even seen a case yet. So how could we know?
So just for a point of clarification, at the time where we would be requesting a warrant for failure to appear, it's because that case is already in court and has already been assigned to a prosecutor. We're not talking about at the arraignment stage. We're talking necessarily about something at either pretrial stage or jury trial stage, which means an individual would have before them the allegations. Now, again, cases can fall apart, but they would be specifically looking at and would have been entrusted with prosecuting that particular case in front of them.
What I'm saying
Because
is
of this,
yes, okay.
I'm so sorry.
We're not,
Because
we're not
of this-
understanding.
It's okay. Because of the specificity of this, what I want to make sure, Councilmember Green, is that we can follow up on the question, and I think that we can come back to give some sort of clarification and some sort of close. I just want to be respectful of, we still have a good portion of our list to get through, and it's already a late hour, and I want to make sure folks can get home to their families and to some dinners that they're probably going to need to warm up. So, hello, the floor is yours, my friends.
Thank
I also
you.
want to acknowledge one of our other commissioners who is here this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and members of the community. My name is Mark Fekier. I am the executive director of the Haitian Community Network, and standing with me is our social services director and a member of the commission. I'm here to speak in strong support of the proposed code changes regarding federal civil immigration enforcement, the use of public spaces and protection for schools and child care facilities. Councilmember Padilla, the Haitian community is 100% behind this legislation. These measures are not abstract policy debates. They affect real families in our city, families who are trying to live responsibly while navigating uncertainty in federal immigration policy. Over the past months, I have spoken with parents, educators, and workers who describe a growing climate of fear and confusion. At our organization, the Haitian community has found a safe space where they can come in and share their stories and their experiences. One mother shared that she now rotates school drop-offs with relatives because she's afraid of going out, followed or filmed outside her child's school. She told me, my daughter asked me, why are people watching us? She thinks that she did something wrong. That is the emotional toll these situations create for children. And a child care provider described individuals lingering outside their facilities with cameras. The provider said, we are trying to teach ABCs, not manage intimidation. These are not isolated experiences. They are symptoms of unclear boundaries between federal enforcement and the everyday spaces meant to serve residents. This is especially urgent for members of the Haitian community who are facing the uncertainty surrounding temporary protected status. Many of these individuals came to the U.S. after devastating crises in Haiti, earthquakes, political instability, and humanitarian emergencies, and were granted TPS precisely because returning was unsafe. Today, as TPS protections faces changes and possible termination, families are living in limbo. They are working legally, paying taxes, caring for children who are U.S. citizens, and contributing to our local economy. Yet, they also fear that routine activities like taking a child to school or attending church could expose them to enforcement encounters. When enforcement actions or related activities appear near school parks and community facilities, the result is not improved safety, it is withdrawal. People stop reporting crimes, they stop seeking services, they stop participating in civic life. That makes everyone unsafe. During this challenging time, and since our conception, the Haitian Community Network has been the voice and the faces of the Haitian community here in Columbus. This is not a political request. This is a human one. This is also important to ground this conversation in facts. Haitian temporary protected status holders are not burdened on our communities. They are measurable economic engine. There are roughly 330,000 Haitian TPS holders in the United States. About 200,000 are already active in the U.S. workforce. These workers generate an estimated of $5.9 billion in economic activities every year in the United States. In cities across the country, including right here in Columbus, Ohio, Haitian TPS holders are helping stabilize local economies. One analysis estimates that their presence contributes tens of millions of dollars to mid-sized cities such as Columbus alone. Hospital manufacturing facilities, hospitality businesses, and services providers rely on these workers. In many regions, they are described as overwhelmingly employed and deeply embedded in local economies. Abrupt disruption of this population does not just affect immigrant families, it risks destabilization of everyone, local workforces, increasing costs for businesses, and weakening economic growth in the communities that depend on them. This is why thoughtful local guardrails matters. While immigration policy is federal, the economic and human consequences are lived locally, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods. I urge you to adopt these code changes to preserve trust in our institutions, to protect children and families, and to ensure that our city remains a place where safety and dignity are shared by everyone who lives here. So we thank you for proposing this legislation, and thank you again for listening to us.
Thank you for being here tonight. The fight is not over. And I think, understanding temporary protected status is important for our community because it is folks who are invited in to our country, folks who are given that protected status because it is unsafe for them from wherever they came from in the world. And so to not have a path for citizenship, to not have a conversation, or if that is a process that we are going to say we're removing this, what then happens is not rooted in humanity and not rooted in people. So thank you for your continued advocacy. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Jonah Hilario. Andrew Hash after Jonah, and then Leo.
Good evening, happy Lunar New Year, and happy Shrove Tuesday to all who celebrate. My name is Jonah Hilario. I am an immigrant from the Philippines and co-director of OPAL. We are a grassroots community that organizes Asian, Asian American, and Pacific Islander women, non-binary, and trans people in Ohio to advance social, racial, and gender justice. Our members include refugees, immigrants, workers, students, parents, and caregivers, and people in mixed status households whose lives are directly impacted by the unjust and increasingly violent immigration enforcement. Since our founding in 2016, OPAL has been working to build power through organizing and civic engagement within our AAPI communities in Ohio, including advocating for compassionate immigration reforms that would prioritize family unity and human dignity at the federal and state level. In this current moment, our communities are living in fear and anxiety as we watch ICE terrorize neighborhoods and families. AAPIs, no matter their immigration status, are afraid to leave their homes for fear of being racially profiled, harassed, and detained by ICE. Asians account for about 1 out of every 7 undocumented immigrants in the U.S. More than 8,000 Asian immigrants have already been arrested since Trump returned to office, but we have seen very little media coverage and low public awareness of the risks to our communities. partially due to fear, language barriers, and past experiences of political oppression. Refugee communities, including the Bhutanese Nepali community that Mr. Piakrel spoke about earlier, and Southeast Asian communities, have already been targeted by ICE. These refugees are at risk of being deported into life-threatening situations of statelessness or sent back to the same countries they fled decades ago because they were at risk of violence or death. We are grateful for the proposals put forth by the City Council as a response to ICE's devastating occupation of Minneapolis and the unchecked violence that ICE and DHS are threatening to unleash in our city. It is the city's moral responsibility to do all that it can to protect its most vulnerable residents, because when ICE agents come into our communities to wage Trump's campaign of fear, it harms all of us. We commend the Council for proposing measures that would uphold its commitment to not using city resources for federal immigration enforcement. We also agree with the need for collecting information about ICE encounters in the community. The city must ensure that AAPI communities receive appropriate outreach and that language access needs are taken into consideration. Many AAPI communities are already fearful of speaking up about their immigration issues, so our communities would need more assurance that reporting will not endanger them or their loved ones. We further ask that the City of Columbus increase its funding for legal defense for immigrants by allocating more funding for the Columbus Families Together Fund. Our pro bono immigration attorneys in Ohio are being stretched way beyond capacity to support clients in need. Data shows that immigrants with access to legal representations were 10 times more likely to win their cases in immigration court than similarly situated people who didn't have lawyers. Unlike the criminal justice system, the immigration justice system does not provide court-appointed attorneys for people who cannot afford one. We also urge City Council to completely cut ties with mass surveillance companies, specifically flock safety. There are no regulations on how flock surveillance technology can be used by government officials, and flock's license plate reader data has ended up in the hands of ICE and CBP, who use it for immigration operations. Thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts with the Council. I just want to reiterate that your AAPI constituents are hurting, and there is widespread fear, even if you are not hearing about this in the media. We look forward to working with you to fight back against tyranny from the current administration and build a Columbus that is safe and welcoming for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for always helping to educate us, for helping to make us more proximate to the community, for being a voice for the community. We appreciate that. I hear you about I don't think that there's anybody who is providing legal services to the immigrant community that is not like stretched super thin. I think even when we've had conversations with ABLE, I'm not sure that we have enough money to give ABLE to meet all of the demand that they have, but I appreciate your advocacy, and the Keeping Families Together Fund is certainly something that we will continue to invest in as a city, so thank you. Okay, Andrew Nash, great, and then Leo, and then Charles Abernathy. Is Charles still here? Yeah. Oh, hi, okay, you're next after Leo.
Hi, Andrew Hash, concerned member of the community. I'd like to open my time by asking the Council, as part of the legislation being proposed, being discussed tonight, to help release a Fourth Amendment workplace flyer that has the city seal on it. This is extremely important and has been done in cities like Chicago. This is critically important and is needed now because many business owners would be empowered to post it clearly if it had the city seal on it. So we ask that the city support these businesses so that they can protect themselves and keep open and express their rights. I also wanted to thank you all for the proposed legislation and support the legislation. Legislation needs to do more than institute protections for government buildings, hospitals, and schools. It should aim to prevent the lease or purchase of any additional ICE facilities. That's warehouse or otherwise. Immigration, detention, and holding facilities have significant lasting negative impacts on surrounding communities, including effects on public health, housing, infrastructure, and local services. The Council can help prevent this. ICE has detained thousands of citizens and non-citizens without regard for due process or the rule of law, undermining key constitutional protections afforded to all people regardless of status. If they build it, they will fill it with members of our community who are not criminals. The council needs to help prevent this in our city. Detention conditions in U.S. immigration custom enforcement facilities across the country are inhumane and fall short of our values as Americans. The Board of Zoning can help prevent this, as was discussed earlier today. Detained non-citizens are routinely denied medical care, access to counsel, and family visitation while in immigration and custom enforcement custody. The council can help prevent this today. That's all I had for today. I'll also see my last minute. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I think it's also very important. We heard lots of folks who work in the community and lots of folks who are aligned with organizations, are a part of the community, and I think it's important for people to hear from everyone in the community. And so I appreciate your advocacy today. The city seal is something certainly that we have talked about as we talk about those signage that you saw in the proposed legislation. That's something that we are thinking about. That's something that we are trying to get in the hands of folks. Actually, we are having a gathering very soon of all of the organizations and leaders that are working in the community, and we're hoping to provide them with some of the resources just as soon as, this week. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Leo, Charles Abernathy, and then Colleen O'Connell. Colleen here? Hi.
Great. Good evening, members of City Council. I'm Leo Almeida, Columbus resident and a naturalized citizen. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on this issue. You've heard from several of our amazing organizations in the city of Columbus that work with immigrants and refugees. So to avoid repeating what they've said, I'm actually going to share my personal story and perspective. I was born in Brazil, and just a couple months before my 5th birthday, my mom and I moved to Ohio. We moved here because my mom wanted me to have a quality public education. Growing up as an immigrant wasn't easy. I often felt othered, faced discrimination, and even had my life threatened as a teenager by someone who told me I should be shot because I wasn't a citizen. All of this happened despite the fact that my mom and I did everything, quote unquote, the right way. While putting myself through college, I earned my citizenship. It was a long and expensive process, but just this past Friday, I celebrated the 17th anniversary of the day I became a citizen. It has always been a special day for me because it represents one of the proudest accomplishments of my life. While I'm proud to be Brazilian by birth and American by choice, I'm also frustrated, sad, and angry about the way immigrants and refugees are being treated by our federal government. I'm tired of seeing people treated like criminals simply because of how they look or speak. It took years to earn my citizenship, and when it finally became official, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I truly felt that I belonged, and that no one could ever take that away from me. Today, that relief has turned to stress. The Trump administration has taken this sense of security from me and from many others. While my path to citizenship had many challenges, I was fortunate to come to the U.S. with my mom because we sought better opportunities. In many cases, there are refugees and immigrants who come to this country because they are fleeing for their lives. They don't just want better opportunities, rather they seek the opportunity to stay alive. These individuals were traumatized as they escaped dangerous situations, and now they are being traumatized again by racist immigration policies and dangerous actions by ICE. This is why I support your effort to address this issue through legislation. While you may not be able to completely stop the bigot who runs our country from the White House, you still have the ability to use local control powers and as a municipal government. You may not be able to prevent ICE from using its cruel tactics, but you can limit its abilities by not providing local resources. Your actions as our elected leaders continue to support immigrants and refugees make me proud to live in the welcoming city of Columbus. This city benefits from the cultural diversity and positive economic impact of the immigrants and refugees who live and work here. This community support of immigrants gives me hope that we can change course that this country is currently on and that we can return to the values that truly make America great. Thank you again for allowing me to provide testimony on this legislation.
Leo, thank you. Thank you, my friend, for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing what is the sentiment of we know many, many people in our community today. And, as a first generation American who was born and raised here, I feel that deeply. I feel like I was born here and sometimes don't feel like I belong here. And people make me feel that way. And the policies that our government is putting forward makes us feel that way and makes us feel unsafe and makes our kids feel unsafe. And that's not fair and that's not just. And I'm proud to live in a city that I do feel safer in. I'm proud to live in a city that I know that I have the support of the community that holds us up and that lives its values. And so I know that you are part of the board of Chris, and thank you for your leadership there and, your continued advocacy. And you are a leader, not just in the Latino community, but across the board. And I just appreciate you so much. And thank you for being here tonight. Charles Abernathy, Colleen O'Connell, and then Fan Bosu. Did I say that right? I'm so sorry. When you get up here, tell me on the mic so I get it right. Hi, welcome back to council.
Welcome. Yes, I do agree with most of the things that you all have proposed, so I'll start with that. My name is Charles, and I'm a Black Filipino queer abolitionist organizer. And who would have thought that Democrats would be asking the community how to stop the harm that they co-created with Republicans when establishing ICE years ago? In fact, here, last year, I was advocating to fully fund community support programs, but instead, you all increased the police budget to hundreds of millions of dollars. That money would have been helpful right now, right? So what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear ideas? Okay. But I want to be very clear. As a queer person, liberation means a world without prisons and detention centers. The idea that more social workers or blue vest in prison, jails, and detention centers will only make the death and disappearance of ICE and the prison industrial complex more humane. That is a cruel logic to follow and a false generosity to offer. We don't need more mediocre reforms or polite debates. We need to abolish these institutions that kidnap and disappear people. So what do you want to do? Labor law. Protect workers regardless of who they are. People who are forced to be undocumented are exploited and have to take the most dangerous jobs just to make a bearable living. And they often have their wages stolen. We can do more for those workers, and immigrants pay their taxes, and corporations, again, steal their wages. Educate yourself on the prison industrial complex. The health outcomes of the Ohio for-profit incarceration system indicates that that is where people go to die and disappear. No amount of community picnics or staged trust-building acts with the Columbus kid killing politicians and law enforcement can erase that data. These are functional concentration camps and plantations. Study white history so you don't implement more white policies. Learn about how politicians like yourself created or have found themselves entangled into destabilizing Latin communities that contribute to immigration due to Western economic terrorism. The victims of Western terrorism have every right to work and live in our America. Stop prioritizing incarceration and see the evil that the for-profit incarceration models that you allow to operate today exist. Imagine how investing in $400 million to community programs and groups could help people achieve the sustainability and safety that organizations like Chris strive to achieve. Invest in community, not neoliberal policies or blue vest. Stop helping the rich profiting from the working class. Stop selling Columbus working class people charity and update the livable wage. Reduce the paperwork to get access to resources like food and housing. Remove any citizenship requirements because Mexico lives in our country. The immigrants who live south, the people who were born south of the border are still working class people, and they are entitled and worthy to the public benefits here in the United States. And also rent control. Some of these may take money, but City Council have increased the police budget by hundreds of millions of dollars. So I guess you can take my community feedback and package it really nicely so you can tell the Nazis to be less aggressive with their Nazism, or you can say Columbus will arrest ICE. And that's the sort of white-on-white crime that I love to see.
Don't leave. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank you for always coming back. Thank you for speaking truth to power. I think there are certainly some things here that we should partner together because, unfortunately, the truth is that the state is also forbidding us from doing some of the things that you were talking about because of their policies. And so I think that that is the place where, as we think about problem solving, I want to ensure that these same sort of testimonies also happen at the State House, and that there are ways that we can come together to advocate for that because, you know, things like rent control, the state prohibits us from doing that. There are certain things that we are talking about. So I appreciate that advocacy, and I think that we should just talk about how we work together to make those things happen.
Yeah, well, and hopefully we don't get shot by ICE or the Columbus Police Department either while doing it.
Thank you, Charles, for being here. Colleen O'Connell. And then we're going to end with Ted Walsh.
Hey, y'all. I am Colleen O'Connell, and I'm here today as a Columbus resident, one of your neighbors. I'm a former middle school teacher, and I currently work as union staff to help the folks that make our public schools possible. And I firmly believe that being neighbors is a sacred bond that we share, and that if you live in my community, I consider you my neighbor, full stop, no exceptions. Every single one of our neighbors in Columbus deserve to feel safe, to participate fully in our community, and to have the opportunities and resources they need to thrive in their new home. And as we collectively witness our federal government wage a ruthless, racist campaign of intimidation, fear, and violence through ICE, we're all called to ask how we can show up for each other as neighbors. In particular, I feel that our elected neighbor leaders are called to do everything you can to protect our neighbors targeted by ICE and to make opportunities and resources possible for them. So I'm grateful for this discussion today and the consideration of the policies to do just that. More importantly, I want to voice my strong support of any policies that protect the dignity, rights, and well-being of our neighbors targeted by ICE, anything you can do to prevent our community resources and spaces from being used by ICE, as well as anything the city can do to prevent our tax dollars from supporting any businesses or contractors working with ICE. And in addition, as a worker who is dedicated to empowering fellow workers, I'm sure that it's already underway, and I always like talking to Andy today to get here. She was excellent. I do hope that workers like the people that helped us get here today are heard and brought to the table to ask what they need for any policies that pass, to make sure that they're fully equipped, that they know who to call in an instant. I taught when the pandemic happened during an unprecedented time, and I know what it's like when at a moment's notice, everything's changing and you're working to make it happen together for a good reason. But it helps a lot if you know who to call, what to do, and what your resources are. That's all that I had to say, and thank you so much.
Well, and thank you for being an educator. Thank you for coming down today. I mean, I think to your point, Central Ohio Workers Center was here earlier today. We've been speaking with our unions as well about what do we do at this time to protect. I mean, I always say this, I think the community is better than us and quicker than us. I think unions, they already have an infrastructure to how they protect their people. I mean, we're learning real time and we're having conversations with our partners, and that's certainly part of the equation. While they were not represented here in the conversation, we had conversations with them about these policies and the continued work that we need to do to ensure that we're protecting folks. And how do we do that in partnership with them as well? Because I think that they already have some policies in place and they're actually lobbying Washington right now. You know, all of our unions are to ensure that we are protecting workers, especially when they're at work sites. We had a situation just the other day where I showed up at a work site, right? And we were having conversations about what was the process. So I hear you. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about today, but it's certainly something that we are having conversations about. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
No, because I'm going to get it wrong, and I want you to tell me the correct pronunciation of your name. Fanamatsu, okay.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Fanan Bansu, and I am here in representation of my community, my family, and People Justice Project. So I came to talk about, so we talked a lot about, a lot of things were said to ensure the communication of how ICE is supposed to act versus how they do act. My reservation with ICE is the fact that their lawlessness has brought about so much trauma to all of us through them having the entitlement of being agents without any kind of, there seems to be no ramifications for their actions. And as President Harding said, had it not been for people taking video, we would not have known about those murders that they've committed. So what is it that we could do as citizens and as immigrants that can keep us safe in that direct moment? Can we call 911 and they're gonna show up? Because I live in a community where sometimes when we call them, they aren't here unless it's gun violence or unless it's so something that, you know, how do we keep ourselves safe? How do we keep our community safe if someone can get shot for videoing? What are we supposed to do in this real time when they're busting our windows out? Because some people, you know, there's fight or flight, and we're supposed to yield to their power, or to their authority. However, we want to keep ourselves safe. So it's like, you know, can you fight back? What can you do without getting killed? We're at a loss because I want my family to be safe. And if someone is coming into your home, busting your car windows out, trying to apprehend you, and it's groups of them versus just one person. I'm a woman. I don't always look like an American. I dress in African clothing. So if they're following me or if they're doing something, what am I supposed to do? So I think that is, and then not to talk about the fact that they haven't even been trained properly, all of them, nor have they been given these an assessment to see where they are mentally. Like, all of those pose a problem. That's where that's what I just want to put out there and see what's being done about all of that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I'm happy anyone can also jump in, but I think there's two things. I think one is, first of all, I think this is where we need to hold our congressional leaders accountable, because they have the congressional authority to ask ICE to change. They have the authority. Like, where we don't, they do, right? That's first and foremost. And that is a dissatisfying answer because of the state of our country right now, but it is the truest answer because we don't have that. Second of all, I will say this. I will say that our community-based organizations are doing God's work today. Our community-based organizations are doing God's work to protect our families, to teach people how to properly be an observer, to teach people how to, or to reach out, like you heard earlier with Corn and with our helpers, to deliver boxes when it is unsafe for people to leave their homes, right? And so I think that as a community, when I look at our grassroots organizations, when I look at our resettlement organizations, they are doing the work and have been doing the work. I mean, we are learning from them, right? We are setting policies in place that we will work to enforce, but we are doing that in partnership with the community, because it is not going, right now, with where we are, it can't just be the city. It can't just be the city that's going to save us. It can't just be, it's going to take a community-wide effort. And I think we're already seeing that work happen. And like I said, we're learning from that work, and we are listening, right? And we're looking at all these policies. There were things on the table that we wanted to go even further. It was about what we were allowed to do. I think the other thing, and I say this all the time, people come to council all the time, and we are here to listen because they have a platform and they have cameras.
Yes.
But the State House The State House is wild, and the State House is putting out policies every day without a meeting like this, without any sort of notice, that is harming our communities far more than anything that is coming out of here. And so I think if we don't place some advocacy there, then we're not going to see the changes, because there are times they could hear the policies that we're putting in today and preempt us tomorrow. And that's real. And so I think that, yes, continue to push on us, but then we all need to collectively also push on them.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the ICE agents that are coming to our city, is there, just like there's a roll call with the police, you know, everybody has identity and everybody has their, how do we know who's in our city?
We don't.
We don't?
So for example, and you can feel free to jump in, when ICE did Operation Buckeye, they gave us no notice that they were coming, nor did they give any notice to the field office that they were coming. We understood that they were here because they were here. They don't have to call us. They don't have to tell us. They didn't even tell their own field office, because that was a blitz team that is sent to different cities around the country. They could stay anywhere between a few days to a few weeks to a few months. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, that's an accurate statement. We were not contacted, and just like you said, we were told that they didn't even contact their local field office, which is their own employees and teammates, that they were coming here. And we do know from the videos that it is the same, a lot of the same agents that are causing issues in other cities. We're seeing the same ones here in Columbus.
And we even, I mean, if folks didn't see the front page of the Dispatch, the governor himself asked for 24-hour notice if they were going to be dispatched to Springfield. So if the governor of Ohio is asking ICE, what are they doing, then certainly the city of Columbus is not going to know what ICE is doing. And so I just put that out there because we're learning as, again, I think we have eyes on the streets. I think part of the reason people are hearing more, ICE has always been here, but we have more eyes now that are reporting it. We have people that are collecting data. And so I think we're just in a different time, and we have more knowledge now than we did in the past. So thank you for asking questions. I think also coming to us with a heart of like wonder and what can we do, and we are always. I deeply believe that now is a time where it has always been a time for advocates and social workers and teachers and community leaders and city government to come together. We may not always agree. We have to hold each other accountable to a lot of different things, but this is the time where we really need to be unified to quite literally save people's lives. So thank you. Thank you for being here today. Ted, come on down. Welcome back to council. Thank you for your patience. You are going to round out the evening.
You saved me for last. I did have some prepared remarks, but I kind of networked tonight. This was extremely helpful for me and for my community. I have over 200 homes in my civic organization that are Hispanic. I've purchased supplies. I've gotten supplies from the city. I've taken to those homes and given out so they know their rights. I have businesses. I'm working, and I'm interested to know about PALS because I've already gone to the grocery stores and said, I'll deliver your groceries. Let me know. I'm working with the Franklin County Auditor's Office now because there are individuals who have homes in our community that are being assessed higher tax rates. I'm working and representing them to help them reduce their taxes. I feel the need to work in my community to make these individuals, I was an immigrant. My family came here in the 1600s, and what I did to the Native American community or what my, ancestors did to the Native, I'm appalled. We brought disease. We shoved them out of their country. I love Councilmember Weich's idea that we need to watch who we do business with. You know what? This is a cancer. Sometimes a cancer requires us to dig down deep and do things that make cause a little bit of uncomfort. Maybe we do need to pay a little more to get business from an individual who doesn't work with ICE. You know, when we have cancer, we have to make the ultimate sacrifice. We have to do things that are uncomfortable. We have a cancer in this nation, and we have to address it. And this is the first step. I appreciate everything that you're doing for the Hispanic community and for the Asians that I have in my community and for the Haitians that I have in my community. We have a church that has a Haitian family in our community on Lockbourne. They just brought in a young infant last year, and now they're afraid this young pastor, he's going to have to go back to Haiti with his family. We need to make sure that we protect those people that enhance our community, who bring us the best of the best. When I was with Ashland University as a student, I traveled overseas, all over Europe, the Mideast, and so forth. I grew to embrace those communities. They taught me things that I never would have known otherwise. I'm proud to have been able to be a part of their community and to grow and learn. That made me a better person. That made me more understanding. That made me search my soul and know that everybody is a part of my community. I love roses. My husband loves daylilies, but we have roses and daylilies because the daylilies make my roses look nicer, and my roses make his daylilies look nicer. They're different, but together they bring a beauty that is remarkable. We need our community of immigrants. They bring the best. They came here with a dream and a hope. Let's make sure that that hope doesn't get extinguished and never leaves. Thank you for your time. I'm in favor of this legislation. Please, please help our community. They mean so much to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank everyone who was here tonight for coming out, for hanging out with us. I know I think this might be my longest hearing on the book so far. I just want to tell people what to expect. So the pieces of legislation that we introduced today was an entire package. While we're exploring the pieces that are a little bit more ready for prime time, those will be introduced on Monday. And then from there, the pieces that might require us to do a little bit more work and a little bit more digging, folks will see those coming in the next couple weeks. But we wanted to present the entire package so everyone could understand what we were considering. And as we make changes, we will share those when they're presented on the floor. We'll explain what the changes are. We'll probably do another presentation. But I want to thank everyone for coming out and for supporting our community. I think back to what Council President said at the beginning of this meeting is that some people will look at what ICE is doing and say that's the best of us, but we look at how we reacted in the community that was here tonight and say, no, this is the best of us. And so as a Columbus kid, born and raised, and the place where my parents chose to call home, the place where I'm choosing to raise my daughters, I'm incredibly proud of our community. I'm incredibly proud of the folks who showed up today. Whether you feel proximate to this community or you felt a sense of advocacy, whether you work in this community every day, this is our community. This is our community. These are our friends and these are our neighbors, and protecting them. If you invest in the people furthest away from justice, all boats rise. And so if we ensure that everyone feels protected, everyone feels that sense of dignity and respect, then everyone in our community will surely feel that. So thank you again for being here this evening. Please get home safe and stay tuned for what might happen on Monday.